Testing 1, 2, testing.
Please be upstanding for Her Worshipful the Mayor and Deputy Mayor.
Before we start, I'd like to go through a few preliminaries. Please note that the meeting is currently being webcast live. A reminder that members do need to stand when speaking in the chamber. May I remind everyone that I intend to adhere strictly to the timings set out in the Constitution, and I'd like to remind members to be mindful to speak directly into their microphones when speaking. If members turn away from the microphone, the sound will not be picked up for online attendees. Thank you. Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Council. My name is Councillor Beth Rowland and I'm the Mayor of Wokingham and I will chair this meeting. Are there any apologies?
Yes, Madam Mayor. We have apologies from Councillor Gary Cowan, Councillor David Davies, Councillor Andrew Gray and Councillor Tony Skuse.
Thank you. Oh, Rebecca's got her hand up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sorry, I also have apologies from John Halsall.
Thank you. Item 121, minutes of the previous meeting. May I sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of February 24 as a correct record? Please, may I have a show of hands? Thank you. There is a majority of the minutes are agreed, so thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? Stephen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have to declare an interest in relation to item 129 in the agenda on the Constitution update, and in specific terms, the part of that relates to the shareholder committee, as I am a director of Loddon Homes Limited and WBC Holdings Limited. I have taken advice on whether this interest precludes me from voting, but it's a personal interest because I am a director, but I've been advised that I don't need to refrain from voting, so I can vote on the item.
Thank you. Any other declarations of interest? Prue.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have the similar interest to Stephen in item 129, the Constitution update. I'm a non-executive director of Berrybrook Homes and Wokingham Housing Limited, which are housing companies affected by the shareholder committee. And similarly to Stephen, I've been advised it's a personal interest and therefore I'm still able to vote on that item.
Thank you. David Cornish.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have the same declaration as Stephen and Prue, a personal interest in agenda item 129, being a non-executive director of Loddon Homes and Wokingham Borough Housing Limited. I have the same advice that I am able to vote.
Thank you. We go on to item 123, which is the Mayor's announcements. And I'd just like to speak very briefly about the Crown Court competition that several of us have been to over the last week or so. I know a few members in here have heard our secondary schools from across the county, not only the borough. Simon Muir, who's the High Sheriff, is retiring this year, and this is one of his swan songs. It's a delight to see our young people who are confident enough to speak in the presence of a magistrate in a court of law when the accused in the case, and they all did the same case, was in the cage at the back, locked in and wasn't allowed to speak, so observed it. And these are all teenagers from the back. So it ran exactly as a Crown Court case would. And I'd like to congratulate all of them. On Saturday morning, we've got the final, and it'd be interesting to see who wins. Very interesting. I've never been in the Crown Court before, but it's a beautiful building, and it was great to see our secondary school children so confident in the way they handled the information that they'd been given and came up with a really good story about what had happened and when and why. Well done to them. That's all I'm going to say as Mayor, but I'd like now in this end of term meeting to ask Stephen Conway to speak for just a few minutes. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We've reached that time in the municipal year when it becomes clear that some colleagues and friends will be leaving us. And as Leader of Council, I wanted to express my gratitude to all councillors who are standing down, regardless of their party. To you all, I say a big thank you for all you've done for the council and for the residents that you represent. With new boundaries marking the end of an era, we have a larger number of councillors standing down than usual. I know of Pete Dennis, Morag Mulvin and Ian Pittock, whom I wish to thank for their work on council committees and boards, in Morag's and Pete's case as chairs, and as very effective champions of their wards. I've learnt this evening that Laura Blumenthal is also leaving us, and I wish to thank her for her help on affordable housing matters and her commitment to our tenants. I must mention as well Graham Howe, he of the spectacular blazer, who served as executive member for Children's Services before Prue, and I've always found Graham a great pleasure to work with. And two long-serving councillors who were also previous executive members, Gary Cowan, who will be remembered, I think, most as a great defender of his ward of Arborfield, and Pauline Hellier-Simons, who was also a former mayor and is standing down after an incredible 42 years. I also know of 3 departing colleagues who served in the executive in this last 2 years with great distinction. Lindsay Ferris, my ward colleague and wise advisor, who has worked tirelessly on the new local plan and earlier served as leader of the opposition, laying the foundations for the creation of the current administration. Sarah Kerr, who brought great passion, drive and commitment to all that she undertook, especially on climate change and violence against women and girls. And Ian Shenton, whose sharp business brain enabled him to analyse complex problems with great clarity, as well as deliver some memorable put-downs. I know too of 3 former leaders of council who are leaving us. Keith Baker, a shrewd and very effective opponent, who also served with distinction as an impressively fair-minded mayor. John Halsall, who led the council with great style and much good judgment through the difficult years of COVID. And finally, Clive Jones, my immediate predecessor, who skillfully piloted a minority administration through the challenging inflation of 2022-23 and is now keen to focus on his parliamentary campaign to replace Sir John Redwood. I hope there aren't other colleagues who are leaving that I don't know about and have missed. If I have, I can only apologise. But I wish everyone who is departing good fortune, and I thank you all very much for your work on the council. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Stephen. Pauline, would you like to say a few words, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to join Stephen in thanking all the retiring members for their hard work on the council. People do this as an activity that takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. It's not particularly well remunerated. They do it because they believe in the community. And I'm very grateful to everybody, regardless of party, for all the effort they put in. And we will miss them, I think. Particularly from our group, I'd like to thank Graham Howe, who's been on the council for 6 years. He's been a school governor, he was executive member for Children's Services and brought a completely different new way of working and a completely different style and enthusiasm to the job. Though he may be leaving this chamber, I'd like to see him again treading the boards on the Walgrave Theatre very soon. Laura, who has been a fantastic champion for poverty strategy and for the rights of women and girls and lots of other things as well. I wish her very well as the parliamentary candidate for Brentford and Isleworth. John Halsall, who was on the council for 13 years, he saw the borough through some of the most difficult times of the COVID pandemic, something that few could have predicted on a scale we haven't seen for 100 years. He was successful in halving the borough's housing numbers after a long campaign lobbying the government. And Keith Baker, another former leader, Keith Baker MBE, another former leader who had 18 years on the council. He's been executive member, leader of the council, he's been mayor, and he's also represented residents in Woodley Town Council as leader of the Woodley Town Council. He was awarded an MBE in 2019 for services to the community and politics. He's a lover of the performing arts, and I'm sure he'll be spending a lot more time on trips to the theatre. But Keith is renowned for his analytical skills, his energy levels, which are comparable to a Duracell bunny, so I'm sure whatever he does, he'll do at 110%. And finally, Pauline Hellier-Simons. 42 years, we think that she's probably the longest serving member of the council, ever. She was first elected in 1982 when her daughter was 3 years old and now has 3 grandchildren. She's held a huge number of roles in her time as chairman of the council for 2 years, mayor of the borough, after Wokingham became a unitary authority, and has represented Wokingham on Berkshire Fire Authority. She's a former teacher and has brought valuable knowledge and experience to her role as executive member for Children's Services. I'm reliably informed she intends to travel more in retirement and read history books, and I believe she's got 3 written by a certain councillor, Stephen Conway, that need to be read and will now get the attention that they deserve. I'd like to thank again all the members who are standing down at this election for their important contribution. And finally, I'd also like to thank Gary Cowan for his 27 years of dedicated service to the borough. He was truly independent and he represented his residents diligently. So I'd like to particularly thank Gary as well. We all come here to serve residents and do our best. We give up evenings we could be spending at home. So I'd like to extend my thanks once more to all the members who are stepping down.
Thank you, Pauline. Rachel, would you like to say a few words?
Madam Mayor,
Thank you, Rachel.
Additional work within the short timescales of the Network Rail project. We do, however, have funding allocated the MTFP, which was approved last month to carry out further feasibility work on the ramps and a route to Molly Millers Lane next financial year, and then detailed design in 2025-26. However, we cannot yet confirm how we will fund the construction of the ramps, which is likely to require several million pounds. Thank you.
Pauline, you're standing.
Yeah, sorry to disturb you, Paul. I wonder if we could request a 2 or 3 minute break just so that the officers can get the video and audio sorted. At the moment it's mirrored and we're not sure if the sound's working.
It's okay.
Okay.
Okay, it's sorted now. Thank you. Paul, had you finished?
Yes, that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Betteridge, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, thank you. The bridge has the potential to provide safe routes for walking and cycling between the town centre and the Molly Millers businesses and areas as far afield as Evandens, Barkham, Arborfield and Finch Hampstead. But currently it's only accessible from the Barkham Road side. What plans are there to make it accessible from the south?
Thank you for your supplementary question. We have allocated funding for 24-25 to carry out work to identify a route to the south from the end of the ramps to Molly Millers Lane, where there is a toucan crossing, which we installed in the summer of 2023.
Thank you. Erin Gallagher, I believe, is online. Erin, would you like to ask your question, please?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me? Can someone confirm that they can hear me? Hello?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. I am asking the executive member for Environment, Sport and Leisure. Currently, our hardworking waste collection teams collect multiple bin bags into a single container bin that they then use to empty into the truck. Considering wheelie bins completely remove this operational process and make things more inefficient, how will this save money?
Thank you for your question. The first component of the savings comes from the £350,000 per year that we have been spending on single-use blue plastic bags, which will not be needed. The second component of the savings comes from the diversion of recyclable waste from the blue bags to green recycling bags, food waste caddies and recycling banks. The third component of the savings comes from operational efficiencies made by moving to this collection system. At present, a compositional analysis of blue bags tells us that almost 60% of the waste in those bags could have been recycled. Amongst the 85% of councils that have already made this change, their experience is that residents become more conscious of the need to separate recyclables so that recycling rates increase and residual tonnage falls. As disposing of residual waste can cost up to £100 per tonne more than recyclables, this will generate significant savings in disposal costs. The Council can no longer afford the luxury of spending £1 million per year more than we need to on waste disposal.
Thank you. Ms Gallagher, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. That did not actually answer my question. And in terms of saving money, talking to the waste collection team this week while they were collecting the bins, has strike action by them been considered in your savings calculation?
I believe I did answer your question. The savings come from three components. That's how it saves money.
Thank you. The third question comes from Guy Grandison, who's in the chamber. Guy, would you like to ask your question, please?
Well, I'm not confident I'm going to get an answer after that. There are several estates in Earley that are not suitable for wheelie bins. Has any provision been made for residents who cannot physically store these eyesores?
We are reviewing areas where bins cannot be stored within the boundary of the property or where the bins are not easily accessible to the collection crews. Each area will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis, but we're able to draw upon the experience under various solutions of the 85% of councils that have already adopted wheel bins.
Do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, I do. So you haven't actually done the work? You My supplementary was simple, was how many homes were actually affected. But if you haven't even done the work, how could you make a guess when you were ordering these bins in the first place in order to make sure how many you needed and how many homes were not suitable?
It's an ongoing process. Most of it has been done. But as things come to our attention, we will look at them on an individual basis.
Thank you. That concludes the public questions. You're very welcome to stay for the remainder of the meeting, but can I ask that you view the meeting from the public gallery? And can I say it's so nice to see so many young people up there. You're very welcome. Item 125 is petitions. Does anyone wish to submit a petition? Thank you. Andy, would you like to bring yours first, please? You're allowed 3 minutes for a summary of your petition.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. My petition is a slightly awkward one. As some members will know, there was an unfortunate loss of 3 disabled bays in Headley Road car park in Woodley. Disabled people were told they couldn't park there anymore. I had a speech for the ages about the iniquity of this. Unfortunately, those pesky Lib Dems foiled me, and they have sorted the problem within days. Within days of me raising it. So I will keep it. I've still got the petition. I would still like a written answer, because you never know, those pesky Lib Dems might just change their minds again. It's always good to get stuff in writing. But I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much to Paul and to Rachel for obviously having some very constructive conversations with officers behind the scenes. But I will give this to Democratic Services later to save time. Is that okay?
The next petition is a 20-mile-per-hour zone in Hawthorne from a Shinfield resident.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Shinfield Labour team have had many conversations with local residents in the Hawthorne and Cutbush Lane area over the last year. Of greatest concern is the speed at which traffic travels through the area, particularly on Hawthorne. Hawthorne is situated within the Littlebrook housing development. It is a residential area with many houses situated in close proximity to the road. It can be entered from both ends, most recently through its newer intersection with the Eastern Relief Road. Residents have made it very clear they consider the current speed limit of 30 miles per hour on Hawthorne and its tributary roads too high and wish for it to be reduced to 20 miles per hour. Predominantly due to the safety of pedestrians and other road users, but also for environmental and community well-being reasons too. We invited comments to be submitted when signing the petition, and this is a small selection. Please reduce the speed limit to 20 miles an hour to save us from major accidents, reduce noise traffic for home users, and provide a cleaner environment for all residents. I do not feel safe letting my children play in our estate due to the high-speed cars travelling through. It is a residential road with families, children and infants using the pavement. It is a narrow road and not safe for over 20 miles an hour. Residents also felt the worsening situation was compounded by the building of and linking to the Eastern Relief Road, both increasing the volume of cars and speed at which they enter the road. At the other end of Hawthorne, the road meets a crossroads over which a new development is nearing completion, increasing the volume of traffic through Hawthorne to reach it. The Labour team have requested a traffic regulation order 9472 to reduce the speed limit on Hawthorne and its tributary roads to from 30 miles an hour to 20 miles an hour, and this position is presented to support that TRO request. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Will you please hand your petition to Democratic Services, who will pass it on to the appropriate officer? We now have a petition retaining to Norris Ward, and Rachel and Mary-Louise are going to present it. Yeah. Thank you,
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. The last meeting we heard from people who both give care and receive care about what they want and the support that's most useful to them from the institutions that are here to support them. The most striking thing that they said was about the need that they have and the desire that they have to live the lives they want to live in the place that they call home. And our petition today is about a small but significant, even emblematic example of how the council could help, but at the moment isn't helping people to live the life that they wish to live in the place that they call home. For residents in Rose Street, living the life they want means being able to welcome caregivers, tradespeople, family and friends into their home. There was a system that helped them do this, a paper permit that could be transferred easily to a vehicle. This system was ended without consultation or warning, and instead a new virtual system was imposed, one which requires residents to link to a specific vehicle registration. First, you have to be a car owner in order to get a permit, and that excludes people who no longer drive or who no longer keep a car. And the permit must be linked to a specific registration number. So while you can apply on this virtual system for different caregivers, for example, you have to know their registration number in order to do this. And for people who may be receiving up to 5 care visits a day, it's impossible to know in advance who is going to come, and this has caused residents to feel that their care is being compromised by this constant anxiety over whether they can secure the parking that they need. The system is unsuited to the situation in Rose Street and to the lives that many of the residents there wish to and are entitled to lead. Social Care Futures in the last meeting spoke of the importance of putting the experience, needs and rights of the cared for at the heart of policy making. And we call on the Council, therefore, to reinstate the previously existing paper permit system to enable our residents to live the lives that they wish to live. We've collected a petition of over 75 residents of Rose Street, which we would like to now present.
Thank you. Will you please hand your petition to Democratic Services, who will pass it on to the appropriate officer? Is that all the petitions? Oh, thank you. Would you like to present your petition now?
Good evening, Madam Mayor, and thank you for listening to my submission. I'd like to preface my remarks by saying that I'm aware that there is no obligation in law for councils to compensate businesses affected by roadworks. I'm similarly aware that the council has very limited influence in certain ways over rates. My aim with this petition is, and has always been, to demonstrate the strength of local feeling regarding the fate of the businesses at California Crossroads. I do not claim to have a ready-made solution for how to help these businesses. That, I believe, should be the responsibility of those elected to ensure the prosperity and good governance of our borough. Rather, I aim only to make the case, the moral case, for why the council must be bolder in its financial assistance. Firstly, I think it is helpful to establish the scale of the issue. One metric could be that I, a 22-year-old, is spending their Thursday evening at a local council meeting, a surefire indicator of a crisis. When I decided to start this petition regarding California Crossroads in late February, the number that I was given was that businesses had reported that their trade was down by 40%. This at the time felt so severe that I worried that people would query its veracity. Since then, businesses at the Crossroads have come forward with significantly higher numbers. Bob's Fish and Chips and Londis down by 50%, Jack's Pharmacist down by 75%, and Cresswell's Garage, a local institution older than I'd wager nearly every resident in Finchampstead, down by 75% on fuel. Outside the actual Crossroads themselves, the barber shop at 9 Mile Ride took in well under £200 for a whole Saturday's trade. 9 Mile Ride's vets are having clients looking to defer appointments and arriving late and stressed because of the situation. I need not remind the Council that the redevelopment is expected to last until September 2024. That is 6 months away. Businesses are not the only losers here. I am not typical of the population of Finchampstead. We have a large elderly population who rely on many of the local services that can be found at the crossroads: a pharmacist, a post office, and an independent garage and petrol station. Losing these businesses will also affect those who live in the vicinity but are not able to drive. Which brings me on to the most damning part of this. If we lose the Crossroads local services because of the redevelopment artificially deflating business, residents will have to travel further afield to access services elsewhere. And I can guarantee you they won't be walking and cycling to Wokingham, Arborfield or Crowthorne. They'll be driving. We will have a wonderful, state-of-the-art, walkable crossroads, but no one will have any reason to go there unless they fancy viewing boarded-up shops. I do not think, or at least hope, that anyone at the council knew or intended to deal a fatal blow to Finchampstead's local businesses when they agreed to the redevelopment. But that is what has happened. Without serious financial intervention to keep these businesses alive, they will go forever. And that, I believe, as do the signatories of my petition, who number now over 600, that would be to everyone's loss.
Thank you. Please, will you hand your petition to Democratic Services, who, as usual, will make sure it goes to the appropriate officers. And one final petition from Jackie Rance, please. Jackie, would you like to present your petition?
Yes, thank you. I have nearly 170 signatures. A Lely path opens out onto the B3349 Hyde End Road. There is no crossing or beacons to make the traffic stop to allow any person to cross. People take their life into their own hands. Over the past 3 years, with the expansion of housing at Shinfield Meadows, which means more families, pedestrians, have turned to their left to avoid crossing the road. They have trampled down the grass to walk along it to the nursery and infant schools, making the ground somewhat wider. The path is treacherous, with mums, dads and children in danger of being swept into the road by the force of cars and lorries or stumbling. It is a fact of life that no one can stop people walking where they wish unless lawfully prevented. So the route the families take on this path will continue. Therefore, I have raised a petition signed by parents and other pedestrians to ask the council to get this muddy track improved, made safer, tarmacked and the shrubs cut back. The nursery school is happy to have the present entrance made good to accommodate a safe passage into the premises. I've been made aware by Shinfield Parish Council that Matt Gold of WBC has said they have the money for it, but there's been delay after delay. The public need to be assured this hazardous path is rectified, ensuring the risk of harm to people is removed.
Thank you, Jackie. You know what to do with the petition. Thank you. Are there any other petitions? Thank you. We move on to item 126, the Affordable Housing Strategy 24 to 26, and we have half an hour on this item. I understand Councillor Stephen Conway is proposing that. Is that correct, Stephen? Thank you. Is there a seconder?
It is correct,
Thank you,
and I do have a seconder. That's Prue. The new Affordable Housing Strategy has been subject to rigorous scrutiny, which has led to some important amendments. I have to say, however, that one amendment that was meant to be made has, I'm afraid, slipped my attention, and Andy Croy will shortly be drawing it to everyone's attention. So I'll mention that when Andy gets to it, and I'll be happy to accept his proposed amendment. The process of consulting overview and scrutiny and getting their input into the affordable housing strategy as it developed illustrates, I think, the constructive role that overview and scrutiny committees can play. And my thanks are due not only to our housing team for their work on the strategy, but also to members of the overview and scrutiny committees for their helpful suggestions. The document, as you can see, aims to focus attention on the need for more genuinely affordable housing in an area of the country where many people are priced out of the market for purchase or private rent. It also highlights the need for more specialist and temporary accommodation, and I hope all members will feel able to support this important document. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Does any member wish to speak against the report? Andy?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Stephen. Yes,
Andy, can you not speak now? Thank you. Prue, do you wish to speak or reserve your right?
I'll reserve my right, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak against the report? Yeah, Andy, would you like to speak now, please?
yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Stephen, for acknowledging the oversight which happened. So the amendment simply seeks to delete 3 words, or, and those 3 words are or creative industries, from the foot of page 2 of the strategy on page 46. And the members who are in the overview and scrutiny management meeting will remember that we discussed this point about providing affordable housing for people in the creative industry who presumably had come down from London. Wasn't really something we thought officers should be looking at. So that is what this is about. Just make sure we have that in writing. Thank you very much.
Madam Mayor, I'm very happy to accept that amendment.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder for that, Andy? Thank you. That now becomes the substantive motion. Who speaks now? Does anyone want to speak against what has now become the substantive motion? You may speak now if you wish to.
No, it's fine. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't need to speak.
Thank you. Stephen, do you want to sum up?
I think there's remarkably little to sum up. Thank you.
Right, let's move to the vote. All those against, please raise your hands. Oh, sorry, all those for. It's end of termitis. That looks unanimous to me. Are there any against? No, thank you. Any abstentions? No? Thank you. We now move on to item 127, the Young People's Housing Strategy. Stephen, I understand again that this is yours to propose. Is that correct?
It is indeed, Madam Mayor.
And do you have a seconder?
I do indeed, Madam Mayor. It's Prue again.
To speak to the report.
I would indeed, thank you. This is a strategy that sits under the main affordable housing strategy that we've just approved. And as its subtitle makes clear, it focuses on particular need for specialist accommodation for care leavers and young people under the threat of homelessness. And I want to thank the officers involved in drawing up the strategy, and especially Sam Watt, who took the draft strategy to various groups, including the Youth Council and the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. And their input was very helpful and led to certain amendments which are reflected in the document you see before you. Again, I hope you will approve this. It's an important document that is designed to facilitate the Council focusing attention on people who are in desperate need of help.
Does anyone wish to speak against the report? Thank you. We now move to the vote on this item. All those in favour of the recommendations as set out in the report on page 49, please raise your hands. Thank you. All those against, please raise your hands. And any abstentions, please. Thank you. The recommendations are carried. Item 128, Statement of Licensing Policy. I know Councillor Sarah Kerr is proposing this report. Sarah, are you ready? Do you have a seconder? Rachel, thank you. Sarah, would you like to speak to the report, please? You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. The statement of licensing policy is an update on best practice and has an opportunity to lift that best practice up further. It's got a set of model conditions and a base on which to build. So the subcommittee can use it as a guide and has the opportunity to add to it on an application by application basis. So it's not a blanket approach, but more a base of expectation, which is clear, unambiguous and enforceable. Before I go into a little bit of the detail, I just wanted to highlight a couple of things about the committee and actually the officers working on this. I mean, I've been on the Licensing and Appeals Committee for 5 years now, ever since I pretty much got elected. And I've seen a significant shift, actually, since Kieran came onto the team and Narinda took over that area. We've moved from a licensing team that's been quite reactive to one that's very proactive. And it's been fantastic to see Kieran apply that sort of place-based local approach to licensing rather than that blanket approach. And I think we saw that in our last licensing meeting with the members of the public that were there, who were very complimentary of the work that he and his team have been doing. And it's definitely been a shift over the last 5 years. And I know they've been working really hard on this particular policy. It's been going on for quite a while, and I'm pleased that we're finally in a place that we're collectively happy with that. And that was something else I wanted to come on to. Having been on various committees over the last 5 years, licensing is probably the only committee that, I mean, it's obviously a statutory and a quasi-judicial committee, but it's a real example of where we leave politics at the door and we collaborate. There's a lot of joint working that goes on, which, as we can see through tonight's policy, brings better outcomes for the borough and the people that we serve. And I hope that the standard that is set by licensing can be adopted in a lot more policies throughout this council, because it really is better for our community. In terms of the policy tonight, this policy is going to deliver better outcomes for our residents. Some examples, there's a new pre-app service in there, very similar to what we have in planning. And this actually saves our local businesses money because they're not then needing to spend a huge amount of money with solicitors. So we're able to, for a very small amount, provide steering assistance in applications supporting those businesses. It also incorporates a series of strategies that this council has recently adopted from our community safety team. And this includes the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy that this Lib Dem administration has pushed for. And we've worked with officers to bring to fruition. And I know they've worked very hard because it's a discretionary thing that we've worked on, but so important for our community. And in this policy, it includes things like the Ask for Angela campaign and bystander intervention training. We also received a lot of input during the consultation process from the public about further safety measures for women working in the nighttime economy. And in response to that, we've included the Get Me Home Safely campaign. This includes things like a risk assessment for transport home for staff. And so it's been born out of the Violence Against Women and Girls agenda, but it's quite rightly being applied to everyone who works in the nighttime economy. And I want to use this as an example of why embracing the Violence Against Women and Girls agenda is an example of how we can make society better for everybody. And that's what this is all about. Before we get to the vote, I mean, I implore you all to support this. We unanimously supported this cross-party and licensing. So I hope we're all going to support this tonight. But just once again, I want to thank the officers who've put in a phenomenal amount of work into this to really build a fantastic policy that I hope we all adopt tonight. So thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Does any member wish to speak against the report? Thank you. We now move to the vote on this item. All those in favour of the recommendations as set out in the report on page 89, please raise your hands. Thank you. All those against, please raise your hands. Were there any abstentions? Thank you. The recommendations are carried. Item 129, the Constitution update. We have half an hour to debate this, and I understand Councillor Imogen Shepherd-Dubé is proposing the report. Is that correct, Imogen? Oh, sorry.
Yes, it is. Madam Mayor, could I ask, please, that we have various points within this, 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4 and 2.5, that we have an individual vote for each item, please?
So I need a seconder. Yeah. Thank you, Rebecca. Yeah. Do we have a seconder? For the proposal, yes.
I'm pleased to second.
Thank you. We need a vote on that now. Can we have a show of hands, please, in favour of Rebecca's proposal?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
We have in favour. That's correct.
Can those of you in favour please indicate?
Can I just say I'm happy to let it go separately if you want to?
They've told me it's at my discretion, so Rebecca will go with that. Thank you. Right, where am I now? You put me off.
We're on. Sorry.
Yeah, we have a second Imogen's proposal. Thank you, Chris. Does anyone want to speak against the report? Laura. Would you like to speak to your report, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Okay. Many of you will be aware that the Constitution Review Working Group has been carrying out a full review of the Constitution as part of its responsibilities. We are trying to simplify it and reorganise it, but we have to keep things that are there for good reason. But we are in the process of bringing the Constitution into the 21st century. The Council's Constitution is a framework that spells out the responsibilities and conduct along with the guidelines of our democratic processes that ensure we are consistent, transparent and accountable. Attached are some of the components that are already to be agreed, by the Council as a whole. These include anti-fraud policies as recommended by the Audit Committee last November. These are subjected to regular review by the Audit Committee. The Shareholder Committee, which is something new and agreed at last week's executive. The change is a result of the Altair review commissioned by Wokingham Holdings Limited, and it involved looking at the recent reviews of councils that have got themselves into financial trouble and the best way to avoid problems. It is not recommended that councillors and officers should sit on these boards on these wholly owned council companies. These board places should be for people who know how to run the business and should only have business interests as their primary objective. But they still need to be accountable to the council and the public regarding its practices and finances. This means that these companies will now need to present their council to a public forum, which increases transparency, accountability, as this is not done currently at this level. By creating this committee with the addition of the opposition member too, we are following the recommendations given to us. We are starting with the housing companies, but it is likely this will be extended to others in the future. The definitions of key decisions is the next thing on the list. This will set the meaning of key financial decisions to 500,000. This is currently not specified in our Constitution, but it will now mean that a decision over £500,000 must come to the Executive as a whole. The Planning Committee. There are a number of changes proposed to the Planning Committee terms, mainly for clarification and updating the terminology. These have been agreed by the Chair of the Planning Committee. And the last final thing is the Director's job titles. We have a few amendments to the job titles of our senior officers which need to be updated, and that's what we have in this report. Thank you.
We know that people are going to speak against this. Chris, a seconder, do you want to speak now or reserve your right?
No, I'll wait and reserve my right. Thank you.
Thank you. Show of hands, please, of those who want to speak. Thank you. Laura, would you like to speak now, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My concern is specifically on recommendation 2.2, Shareholder Committee, the details of which begin on page 289 of the agenda in Appendix 2. In establishing a shareholder committee for the Council's housing companies, it takes away councillors from being directors and dilutes their power. Talking to councillors and other councils where this change has been made, they have one strong view, that is, don't do it. Downgrading councillors from directors to being on a shareholder committee that only meets 3 times a year takes away responsibility from councillors. No restructure assurance can mitigate this. As elected members, we have a duty to be responsible for the decisions that this council makes and its bodies, acting in the best interests of our residents. We don't want to be kept away at arm's length, so we aren't a bother, and given the pretense that we're actually going to be giving better oversight and influence. Other councils which have moved to a similar model have said that it doesn't work and will just be a matter of time until we move on from this shareholder committee version. I'm not against change of any kind, and although resistance to this change has been made in the corporate and community overview scrutiny meetings, councillors have suggested getting independent people with expertise on as directors of the housing companies, which is what is done in the business world. We need a range of experience and expertise. Based on the real-life experience of other councils which have gone through what is being proposed tonight, I'd ask councillors to vote to reject this recommendation, which is not in the best interest of residents, better outcomes, or holding councillors to account.
Thank you, Laura. Charles, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd also like to speak against 2.2. We're all here to represent our residents. The purpose of councillors being involved is to ensure the interests of residents are maintained. When I was first elected to the council, I was asked to sit on the board of Optalis. At that time, this company had a structure very similar to what's proposed here. There was an operational board which met with no councillors present, and a representatives board which included councillors. As a form of scrutiny or oversight, this simply did not work. Management would come along, give a 20-minute presentation on an item, take 1 or 2 questions, pat you on the head, and then say, see you in 3 months. When I first became lead member for adult services, myself and the lead officer decided that the direction and strategy of the company needed to change. The management of Optalis did not like this and deliberately obstructed us. They lobbied other councillors and officers against us and tried to break down the process as much as possible. It took 18 months to get the changes through, which were in the interests of our residents and the council, because the structure gave the company management too much power and too little accountability. The final result, which is how Optalis, I understand, is structured today, is 1 board, not 2, containing councillors, officers and operational staff, which is far superior. Why is this even proposed? The company, strangely enough, do not want councillors there asking them questions and want them to be removed. A report has been produced which was instructed by the council and the companies, paid for by them, and has come to the conclusion they want. Do you want me to continue? Okay. A good management team would welcome challenge and scrutiny as it would lead to better decisions. The proposal, as it's shown, sets a minimum tone of 3 meetings a year to scrutinise all of the council's housing companies. On average, 30-40 minutes talking about each company, a couple of presentations, the opportunity for 1 or 2 questions per councillor. What are the risks here? We all hope that the council companies are successful in helping the council achieve its policy aims and generating a return. However, there are examples today in the UK of council companies making poor decisions, incurring losses, and in one case, a Section 114 notice. There's no guarantee that maintaining a councillor on the board would stop this. However, if the right person was selected, it would lead to an extra layer of scrutiny on behalf of the taxpayer, which will be removed by this process. This change will reduce scrutiny, reduce accountability, reduce control by the council, and from my personal experience, it won't work. I'll vote against this.
Pauline.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to object to the same proposal as my colleagues have objected to, for the same reasons I raised at scrutiny and have also talked to Stephen about, so he well understands my point. I think it's important to have an independent voice on boards who can provide oversight on the running of the council to the benefit of residents. My experience from business is it's perfectly normal to have people on boards with varied experience in company boards. In fact, often the best questions are asked by people who've got wide business experience, but aren't necessarily experts in the business that the board does. I think it's really important to have people on the board who can actually get involved in the detailed reports. The proposal shows that every 3 months they'll get a report, they'll not actually be involved in discussions, and will not be at board meetings frequently enough to give sufficient oversight. Finally, the opposition member on the shareholder board, to add insult to injury, I'll remind councillors that that is a non-voting position. Now, if you want an opposition member on the shareholder board, I don't see why that should be non-voting. When we ran the council companies, as Lindsay will remember, we actually had opposition members as full voting members on the boards of the council. And we used to listen to Lindsay and we used to listen to Gary Cowan because they had relevant experience and relevant input. So I don't really see why you would want to disenfranchise an opposition councillor just because they don't happen to be from the same party. You're all meant to be representing the residents and doing what's right for residents. So I would also object to that proposal as well. So in summary, I think this is a really bad idea. I think having people with wide business experience on the boards is helpful. I don't think having a board full of people who know about housing and not anything else is very sensible, and I will definitely be opposing this.
Stephen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wasn't planning to speak on this, but I'm afraid there have been so many inaccuracies stated in the speeches we've just heard that I thought it was necessary for me to say something. You might care to remember, actually, Pauline, that while Lindsay was put on one of the housing companies, as you correctly state, he was summarily removed from it as well, without a by your leave. You talk as though the current system has been a resounding success. Well, I'm afraid it may be news to you, but in recent years it has not been a resounding success, and that's not the recent years of this administration. It predates it. Things have not been as good as you think they have been. This is why we commissioned an independent report. That independent report has made recommendations by experts which you are now dismissing as though they're unimportant and they can't possibly carry weight compared with your knowledge of the situation. Well, I'm afraid I have more faith in the independent report than I have of your recollection of how the system may have worked in its heyday. I should add, and I'm glad to see that Charles did clarify this point, 3 times is the minimum, the amount of times the shareholder committee would meet, not the maximum, and in practice it will undoubtedly be meeting a lot more than that. The shareholders committee will be actually setting the strategy for these companies and monitoring progress in the implementation of the strategy. I have to say, I think they will be able to do that far more effectively than individual executive members sitting on the boards ever managed to do. That's certainly my belief, and I would urge colleagues to support this recommendation. I think it makes great sense. It's based on expert advice, and I think we would dismiss that expert advice at our peril.
To Chris.
Yes, I'd like to speak, if I may.
My microphone isn't working properly.
It's okay. Yes, I second this motion for the simple reason that I looked at the documentation in front of me and listened to the advice and read the advice of the experts, and I do believe that this particular item should be accepted and brought into the Constitution. As has been pointed out, there's been some misdirection for some of the comments made, saying that that only 3 meetings per year would take place, when in fact it has to have at least 3 meetings a year and could be as many as required to get things right. I do accept that the experts that have carried out the survey and given the advice to the executive and the officers have done a good job, and I do accept their advice in this particular matter. And in my opinion, I would vote for all of the entries for this constitution update.
Thank you, Imogen. You'd like to speak now, please?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that I'm the executive member for finance, and it's something that I think is important because it offers us transparency and more visibility of what's happening in these companies. If they have to bring it to a forum that is public and people can ask questions, and not just one individual councillor, I think that's an important move and a move in the right direction. Thank you.
Right, we now move to the vote. The vote will be... Oh, sorry. Lindsay's got his hand up. Lindsay,
Could I have a point of clarification? Because when the opposition raised it, they wanted a separate vote on all 5 areas. The only area that's been spoken about is 2.2. So could I counter-propose that we vote on 2.1, 2.3, 2.4, 2.5 in one block and 2.2 separately?
That's what we're going to do. So we've got a 3-part vote. The first one is... The first one, sorry, let me... Yeah, Graham's just clarified it for me. It is a 3-part vote, and it starts with note 1 on the paperwork on page 247. The progress towards completing a fundamental review of the Constitution. Okay? Can you please show if you are in favour of that? Yeah.
Recommendation.
Oh, that's the notes.
No, recommend.
Right. Graham tells me I've read out the right words for you. The recommendation, numbered 1 on the paperwork, notes the progress towards completing a fundamental review of the Constitution.
Say 4.
This is 4, yes. Against? Any abstaining? Right, that's carried. The second vote is 2.2 on the paperwork, the shareholder committee. Can we show 4, please? And against? And abstentions? Thank you. And the third, that's carried. The third vote is 2.1 to 2.5 minus 2.2. The third vote's a mathematical one. 2.1 to 2.5 minus 2.2 and 2.3. Oh, sorry, just 2.2. If you've got the answer to that, raise your hands. This is 4, yeah. Thank you. Against? Abstentions? And that is carried. Item 130, the Audit Committee report. I understand Councillor Rachel Burgess is moving that report. Is that correct, Rachel? Have you a seconder? Mike Smith is the seconder. Rachel, would you like to speak to the report?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Audit Committee has had a full year carrying out its duties overseeing council governance arrangements, gaining assurance on internal controls and risk management, and overseeing internal and external audit. I'm pleased that we've been able to build on the positive changes that we made last year to make further improvements this year. We now have 2 independent members on the committee. We have instigated the opportunity for private meetings between members and auditors directly, as well as conducting a skills audit of committee members. The committee has maintained a genuinely non-political focus throughout. Audit Committee is not complacent and seeks to improve further in future, for example by working on the production of a council assurance map. We welcome feedback from other members and stakeholders to help the committee continually improve in its important role. Finally, I would like to sincerely thank the officers for supporting.
Difficult to hear you. Could you please be a bit closer to the mic?
Oh, just move. Just move. Finally, I would like to sincerely thank the officers for supporting the committee so very well during the year, for the contributions by internal and external auditors, and for the contributions of members of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Is anyone against? Show of hands? No? We go straight to the vote then. Can you please indicate if you are in support of the Audit Committee report? Thank you. And against? Any abstentions? That report is carried. Item 131 on our agenda, the Standards Committee Annual Report. I understand Councillor Morag Mulvern is proposing the report. Morag, is that correct? And who is your seconder?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, that's correct.
Thank you. Who is your seconder? Thank you, Caroline. Morag, would you like to speak to the report?
I would just briefly, thank you, Madam Mayor. This report reflects the dedication and the professionalism of our monitoring officer and his team, and I am proud to propose it. Thank you.
Does anyone wish to speak against the report? We'll now move to a vote on this item. All those in favour of the recommendation as set out on the report, please raise your hand. Thank you. All those against? Any abstentions? The report is carried. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is the Overview and Scrutiny Committee Annual Report. I understand Councillor Alistair Neil is proposing that. Al, is that correct?
That's correct, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Who is your seconder? Thank you. Chris. Alistair, would you like to speak to your report?
Right, thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Yes, I mean, the diverse activities of the Council are reflected in the variety of topics covered by the Overview and Scrutiny Committees. So just to highlight a few from this year, where Overview and Scrutiny has been a forum for introducing policy programmes, engaging with outside organisations and shaping council policies. So, perhaps, and some examples are the Social Care's Future, which came to Council in January, had a soft launch at the Health Overview Scrutiny Committee before that, and with their very impressive presentation. And the much derided in the press Thames Water have given the Overview Scrutiny Management Committee engagement with a top-level technical team, including the visit we had to the Wargrave Treatment Works. And the committee gained a sort of real insight into the practical engineering and chemical biological problems they face in providing this vital service to residents. And also in children's services, where the Overview Scrutiny Committee engaged with residents and the executive in formulating a home-to-school transport policy that's both sort of fair to the council and while still meeting the needs of vulnerable children. So, I mean, these are all big achievements, I think. So I'd like to thank all the officers, executive members, residents and members of outside bodies for their contribution to Overview and Scrutiny, and especially thank the officers who support all the scrutiny committees. So I'd like to commend this report to the council.
Thank you, Al. Does any member wish to speak against the report? We now move to a vote on this item. All those in favour of the recommendation as set out in the report on page 327, please raise your hands. Anyone against, please raise your hands. Any abstentions? That report is carried. We move on to item 133, outside body reports. Stephen, I understand you're proposing a report. Is that true?
It is correct, Madam
And who
Mayor.
is your seconder? Thank you, Prue.
Thank you.
Stephen, would you like to speak?
Yeah, I'm not going to detain colleagues for very long on this. Just really to thank those councillors who submitted reports and to thank them also for the work they've done on these outside bodies, many of which play a vital part in our community. So thank you very much, and I hope we will continue to receive such good and full reports in the future. Thank you.
Move to a vote on the... Does anyone wish to speak against? Oh, Keith. Thank you. Yeah, Prue, do you want to speak now or reserve your right?
I'm slightly stunned that Keith wants to speak against, so I reserve my right. Thank you.
Keith, speak.
Thank you. I do want to support it, but I need to call in question on page 391 the report of the two councillors on the Woodley Town Centre Management Initiative, which is actually management partnership. There are incorrect statements made in that report. For instance, Woodley Town Council is heavily represented, so it often feels like an arm-length version of WTC. As you will know, Beth, there is 2 Woodley Town councillors on it. There are 2 Wokingham Borough councillors. That is not heavily represented. There then goes on saying that they cannot take but the most basic actions. It's a shame that they haven't actually read the terms of reference for the Woodley Town Centre Management Initiative, and the terms of reference gives them total independence within the structure. The only reason why they are part of Woodley Town Council is for financial reasons, for VAT and other things. I think it is absolutely appalling that these statements, which are totally incorrect, are being made. It's sad. It shouldn't happen.
Does anyone else wish to speak? Andy.
Because as I wrote that report, I'm more than happy to stand by every word that I wrote. When I wrote the report, and if you look at the context of the report, Keith, because it is an open meeting, it is free to anybody to come. You're not a representative from Woodley Town Council on the initiative. You are, okay, you are one of them. But there are always a gaggle of Woodley Town councillors, as you'd expect for a body which works for the benefit of Woodley. And the politics of that group is very much influenced by the politics of Woodley Town Council. And the comment on their inability to do bigger projects is entirely to do with the funding, as I have made clear. They get a few tens of thousands from the borough, a few tens of thousands from Woodley, and they're very, very restricted in terms of what they can do. If you compare them to similar setups in other parts of the borough, the spending power of other parts of the borough is much higher because they have more money. The management partnership does not have the money it needs to do to carry out the bigger projects. And that's why they've been scrabbling around for money just to put up some CCTV, for example. I stand by every word.
Prue, would you like to speak now?
Thank you. Very briefly, Madam Mayor. I'm very pleased that in his final council meeting, Keith has had an opportunity to speak. It would be a shame if this meeting went past without that happening. I'm not going to interfere in a spat between Keith and Andy, which doesn't involve any Liberal Democrats. But what I would say is that the outside body reports are a reflection of the members on those outside bodies, and so there could be a disagreement with other members of an outside body. And we will note Keith's comments, but I don't see that as reason not to accept the reports. Thank you.
Stephen.
Yes, likewise, I'll try and maintain a studious neutrality on matters Woodley-like. I wouldn't like to get drawn into that particular battle. I would remind all colleagues that the recommendation is simply to note the reports on the outside body representation for the 2023 municipal year as set out in Annex A to this report. That is all that's required of you. I hope, therefore, everyone can agree. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move to the vote. Please show 4. And against? And any abstentions? That report is carried. Thank you. That's the end of those. We now move on to item 134, member question times. We have 30 minutes for this. I'd like to remind executive members that responses to questions must be no longer than 2 minutes and the time it is going. We have 7 questions from members. Councillor Sam Akhtar, please will you put your question?
Thank you, Chair. The car park adjacent to Charville Piggott Primary School has been closed since 20th of November due to a sinkhole. As a result of the car park being closed, families are having to park on the road outside. With no crossing outside the school, this is very dangerous. I am aware Charville Parish Council and WBC have agreed to jointly fund the repairs. Can you please provide a timeline for the repair work of the sinkhole and reopening of the car park, as well as confirming what is being put in place to ensure pupils can cross the road safely in the meantime? Thank you.
Thank you, Sam, for your question. As you observed, the Borough Council has been working in partnership with Charville Parish Council. An agreement has been reached between both parties to enable the remedial works to the sinkhole to be carried out. Extensive survey work has been necessary to review the geology and drainage in the areas in the vicinity of the sinkhole to make sure it's not part of a wider problem. I'm glad to report that we now know that it is not part of a wider problem. We are therefore in discussions with the contractors to carry out the remedial works on the area of the sinkhole, and we estimate that these will be concluded no later than at the end of April. As we know that the problem is confined to the area of the sinkhole itself and not wider, we intend to reopen the eastern part of the car park, that's the car park nearest the school, while work proceeds on the sinkhole, which should remove the necessity for parking in the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sam. Do you have a supplementary? Thank you. Ask his question of the Executive Member for Active Travel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Following all the recent rain which has left the borough's roads in a worse state than before, with existing potholes and those recently filled deteriorating rapidly and new ones forming, Wokingham Borough Council has received a current baseline of £4,321,000 for road maintenance from the government for this municipal year, plus £418,000 and £589,200 in additional funding. Funding for road maintenance from the government has increased by 30% compared to the previous municipal year. Please can the Executive Member for Active Travel, Transport and Highways advise how this will be spent?
Thank you, Michael, for your question. Department for Transport statistics show that our road network is in better shape than the national average. It puts the borough well into the top 20 of councils for maintenance work carried out on its road network. Despite this, the long-term underfunding of road maintenance by the government has created an enormous backlog, making roads more vulnerable to damage, including potholes. And the annual alarm survey now estimates that there is a backlog of £16.3 billion in England and Wales. This is an increase of £2.1 billion in 1 year. In Wokingham, the baseline government allocation of £4.054 million for this financial year includes £2.280 million for structural road maintenance. The remainder is for other highway assets such as crash barriers, integrated transport and bridges. With inflation, when inflation is factored in, our annual spend is a reduction in real terms of our road network investment. Furthermore, this reduction is further impacted through out-of-date data used by the DfT in its funding assessments. It still uses road length data from 2012, despite authorities providing road length data annually. Wokingham has seen a 61% increase in the length of its urban unclassified road network, aligned to meeting its housing provisions, yet it is not being rewarded fairly for doing so. The allocation of 418,000 received this year and the 418,000 identified for next year will be used to support its structural maintenance programme. The commitment is to spend these sums before the end of March 2025. The allocation of 589,000 is being spent on planned works involving surfacing and structural repairs across 27 locations.
Paul, sorry, you've run out of time.
Have I?
Yes.
Oh, I only had a tiny bit to do.
Michael, do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, I have to that one. Quite too sure I got the answer I particularly wanted, but I think when you travel around the borough, and certainly when you go outside the borough as well, the roads around here are in absolutely dreadful state. Yeah, I work in Henley, Lindsay. I do know what it's like, and that's what I was referring to, particularly along Playhatch Road. But that's not in our borough.
Question,
but
please.
I'm trying to give one, actually, but I was interrupted by Councillor Ferris, Madam Mayor. So, in the nicest possible way, of course. But I will try and get there. But the roads are in a rather abysmal state, and what Councillor Fishwick's actually announced is these are substantial amounts of money. So what I really want to know is how will this be prioritised and when is the work going to start? Thank you.
The work is undertaken using road condition surveys. These are done annually. This develops our programme and it's rated into red, amber 1, amber 2 and green. What we focus our efforts on is part of it into the red, that's the resurfacing, and the preventative maintenance into the amber 1 and amber 2. That prolongs the life of the asset, so we can get that in a condition where we don't need to touch it for the next 5 to 10 years. The work has already started in April, May time. It will be starting this spring. It will be a continuous programme throughout the rest of the year, and it will be actually published on our website, and part of that information is already on our website, which is the Network North requirements of 418,000. That's published because government requested us to publish which particular schemes we're going to be focusing on with that particular money. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Councillor Steve Newton, please, to put his question to the Exec Member for Finance.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Last September, The Guardian reported that Woking Borough Council had announced a sweeping package of cuts to local services after the local authority in effect declared itself bankrupt in June, revealing a 1.2 billion deficit racked up from a risky investment spree overseen by its former Conservative administration. In Wokingham, the Liberal Democrats ran a successful campaign to stop the excessive borrowing and speculative investment by our Conservative administration. Who knows where we might be now if that campaign had failed. As part of its prudent financial management, Wokingham lends money to other local authorities. The council lent 10 million to Woking at 4.75% interest, a return of over £356,000 to be repaid on 8th of March 2024. The council tax baseline report that was considered by this council in January showed that there are approximately 74,000 households within the borough, so the loan interest equates to a windfall gain of just under £5 per household. Did the loan and interest come back as promised, and can you please include in your answer how the additional £356,000 will be used to help our residents?
Thank you, Stephen. The loan was indeed repaid to us on time and all of the due interest was received. All of this interest received is accounted for in the general fund budget position. And the great thing about this interest payments is that it is revenue. Revenue is spent on running the day-to-day services that everyone uses. These day-to-day services include things such as running libraries, getting children to school, fixing potholes, and providing care for the elderly and disabled, which are just some examples. Many of these loans are made from ring-fence capital. One example might be the money that a developer gives us to build a road. In that instance, the money comes in slowly and the houses are sold as the houses are sold. And we cannot spend the money until we have enough of it to start building that road. We also cannot spend the money on anything else, but we can loan it to another local authority in the short term. It is important we look at the best way to invest that money, including considering loans to other local authorities which offer a better return. This is important as it is also one of the mechanisms to protect us against inflation pressures. Okay, that's it.
Stephen, do you have a supplementary?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, I do. I understand that there was an article in the local paper about the council actually losing money on this loan. Is this true?
I'm afraid it isn't. I believe the article is in relation to a forward deal to borrow that was agreed in November 2022, based on the council's high projected spending needs. We secured the loan at an interest of 4.2% on this borrowing and therefore hedged against escalating interest rates, which did indeed occur. As a result of our rigorous endeavours to reduce and delay the capital expenditure and reduce our level of borrowing need, this money was able to be lent out at the short term at a rate of 4.75% in June 2023, and it has been subsequently lent out again at 5.5%, which you will see is somewhat higher than the 4.2% that we borrowed it at. I stress this would not have been available if we hadn't continued at our previously expected rate of capital spending that has been set out by the previous former administration. So no, it's completely untrue that the council lost money, and the combined work of expenditure management and the sound investment decision making, and we actually made £41,000 of revenue on this deal. This is all part of our relentless treasury management efforts to reduce costs and maximise income wherever we can, and I thank the team for all their work that goes into this complex and significant ongoing activity of borrowing and lending. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Andrew Mickleborough, please, to ask his question of the Executive Member for Equalities, Inclusion and Poverty.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It is widely acknowledged that the Household Support Fund, HSF, has been a vital lifeline for many of our vulnerable residents during the ongoing cost of living crisis. The HSF was set to end on the 31st of March. Following robust lobbying from charities and councils, the Chancellor announced in the March 6 spring budget that the HSF will now continue to September. However, concerns have been raised that extending the HSF for only 6 months rather than a full year has continued the uncertainty about the future of this fund, as there was in the months leading up to the budget. What is WBC doing to mitigate the impacts that the extension of the still needed HSF by only 6 months rather than a full 12 months is likely to have on our borough's residents?
Thank you very much for your question. I'm pleased that following the lobbying in Wokingham and nationally, the government has finally decided to extend the Household Support Fund. This gives us the money to continue to provide children on free school meals with food vouchers over the school holidays until the end of this year's 6-week summer holiday. We're urgently exploring the best way of using the remaining money to support residents living in hardship. I share your concerns that the extension is only for 6 months. This leaves our most vulnerable residents facing a financial cliff edge with no certainty about how the government plans to replace this funding. Unless the Household Support Fund is replaced, the government will be directly removing money from the pockets of those who need it the most. To mitigate the impact of short-term government thinking, we will continue to invest in longer-term solutions to fight poverty in Wokingham. Our Tackling Poverty Action Plan is supporting the launch of the Roots Community Store, including helping it to expand and become self-sustaining. is continuing to support the 2 school days projects to directly help families living on the lowest incomes afford the cost of the school day, and is rolling out help to prevent residents from getting into unmanageable debt through debt surgeries and our partnership with the Boom Community Bank. And of course, the Hardship Alliance, made up of VCS partners and the council officers, continues to be key to understanding who is in the greatest need and targeting resources to support them.
Andrew, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. Thank you. And thank you, Rachel, for sharing my concerns regarding the extension of the HSF for just 6 months, and also for sharing with us some of the many activities that our council is engaging in to support our most vulnerable residents during these difficult times. Notwithstanding, will you be recommending to other executive members that WBC lobbies our local MPs and the relevant government minister to ensure that the HSF will continue for a full 12 months?
Thank you very much for your supplementary, and yes, that's a very definite yes from me. I am already talking to the officers about what we can do. The cost of living crisis isn't over by any stretch of the imagination. It's not going to be over in 6 months' time. In fact, there were some figures which were published today which showed that the UK was facing the greatest rise in those living in absolute poverty in 30 years. If this money isn't extended as we go into the winter, we are going to see Wokingham residents who are not going to be able to afford enough food and enough heating. It is absolutely critical that this money continues. So we will be lobbying on this for the money to continue, or even better, for the Household Support Fund, which is a kind of like a temporary patchwork of funding, to be replaced by something which is a longer-term coherent way of supporting those who live on the lowest incomes.
Thank you. Councillor Caroline Smith, please. Her question to the Executive Member for Children's Services.
Thank you. Good evening. In the last school year, I understand the school secondary placements went very well, with most pupils getting their first choice. This is a great achievement, with challenges such as underfunding, extra homes being built above the required amount, and high numbers of mid-term incomers. Please, can I have an update on exactly how many pupils have attained their first choice at secondary schools this year? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. On the National Offer Day this year, 97% of Wokingham children received a school place offer of one of their preferred schools, and just over 80% received an offer of a place at the school of their first choice, and both outcomes are better than the last 2 years. And I have a table of who got what preference, which we can ensure goes into the minutes.
Thank you. Caroline, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I have. Thank you very much, and I'll be looking forward to looking at that table. I'm also pleased to say that sounds a great success story for our residents of Wokingham. And can I assume this will continue on to next year? Thank you.
Thank you for your supplementary. I never like to assume anything, but I believe that we do have plans in place, and in fact, at the Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee last night, we had a preview of the forthcoming school places strategy, which showed that we are confident that we will have enough places for secondary school children for the next few years, thanks to the cooperation and the building work that's going on with our academy trusts and local secondary schools. So I am very hopeful that it will.
Councillor Mike Smith, please will you ask your question for the Executive Member for Active Travel, Transport and Highways.
Thank you. I've seen on television and read in media that potholes are affecting roads across the whole of the country, not just here in Wokingham. Therefore, it would appear that government has underfunded all local authorities for this activity. Please, can you help me understand this more fully? In Wokingham Borough, what funding has been allocated to road servicing schemes in the last 5 years, and what is allocated going forward for this coming year?
Thank you, Mike, for your question. I've got a table on here for you, so you can have a look at that afterwards. It sets out the allocations approved within the MTFP for the previous 5-year period and the current financial year. The government allocation has remained static at 2.280 million a year since 2018. Nationally, the latest road maintenance study found there was a backlog of over 16.3 billion in local road repairs due to a decade of underfunding by this Conservative government. This is an increase of 2.1 billion in the past year. We also put money in as a council. Contrary to what the Conservatives may claim, in their final budget, inherited by the Lib Dems, Conservatives cut the council road maintenance by 28%. Despite the biggest financial challenges the council has ever seen.
Paul, will you stop, please?
The question was about road resurfacing. Paul is now talking about pothole repair, which is a revenue budget, not a capital budget, so he's mixing two things up.
No, I'm not talking about that. I am talking about capital. This is capital here, and this is capital for resurfacing.
And you started talking about potholes.
As a previous executive member, I thought you'd understand what defects were.
I certainly do
they are
understand,
revenue
Paul.
funded. Resurfacing is structural maintenance undertaken using capital.
You said potholes. Potholes are not
Pauline,
resurfacing.
can I stop you, please? Stop both of you. If you wish to raise a point of order, will you please give me the details of that point of order? Thank you. Carry on, Paul.
All right, thank you. Despite the biggest financial challenges the council has ever seen, we have protected the road maintenance budget in cash terms. We have also introduced innovations to make this money go further. Our roads are above average for condition when compared to other councils. This is because we chose to invest in them ourselves, which we do via capital borrowing each year to a similar value to the government-based grant. Without that, our network condition would be far worse. The government's cancelled HS2 project has provided us with an additional 418,000 in 23-24 and 24-25 that we have committed to strategic maintenance. 418,000 will pay to resurface around a tiny 0.37% of our road network. But 40% of our roads are already assessed as in need of resurfacing.
Paul, your time is
Therefore,
up.
the
Please,
reality is
stop?
the additional funding is a drop in the ocean.
Thank you, Paul. Mike, do you have a supplementary?
I do, thank you. I think I understood the figures that were just given to me. A very comprehensive answer, thank you, Paul. If I've understood it correctly, then for the last 6 years, we've had a 25% cut in real terms from central government funding for road maintenance. As a professional engineer, I spent most of my career trying to maintain systems that were both hazardous and complex, where maintenance is always intended to prevent failure. Whereas in local authority contexts and most of the building trades, it's all about repair after failure. I'm aware that we put substantial money, just over £2 million, into this year's budget. Has the borough always supplemented some of the shortfall by government? And how has the lack of government funding contributed to the poor state of the roads around the borough, please?
The previous Conservative administration didn't actually supplement any government grant funding before 2020. And underfunding then, together with latest road maintenance survey findings, provides a growing backlog of maintenance in England and Wales, now 16.3 billion. The continued long-term underfunding by this Conservative government is certainly one of the main reasons for the poor state of all our nation's roads.
Thank you. Councillor Laura Blumenthal, please, to ask a question of the Executive Member for Health, Wellbeing and Adult Services. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Council's Violence Against Women and Girls Action Plan contains little to no measurements to let us know if the actions are reducing violence against women and girls in our borough, which is its ultimate aim. In autumn 22, I asked Councillor Sarah Kerr at Executive if it would contain measurements, and she said yes, there would be SMART objectives, with the M standing for measurable. In July 2023, the Corporate and Community Overview and Scrutiny Panel saw that this wasn't the case, and councillors cross-party said the plan needs to contain measurements. In January 2024, half a year later, the Scrutiny Committee saw that the plan still contained no measurements. At the end of February 2024, we were emailed the plan with a small number of the actions containing measurements, but with the majority none at all. Why do we have a Violence Against Women and Girls action plan with a complete inability to indicate if it's reducing violence against women and girls in a borough at all?
Thank you for your question, Laura. I'm sorry you've made a vital part of our work with often badly traumatised women political. As you know, reducing violence against women and girls is a complex and cross-cutting subject. Attitudes towards gender-based violence are often outdated and show prejudice against women and girls across systems, processes and cultural norms. The development of a Wokingham Violence Against Women and Girls strategy and action plan shows our commitment to acknowledging that this must be challenged and changed. In line with comments received from the Corporate and Community Overview and Scrutiny Committee, to ensure the work we embark upon is victim-focused and victim-led. We must take time to understand the experiences of local victims. For obvious reasons, this must and will be managed and navigated carefully and sensitively. I hope we all understand that to change decades of systematic abuse of prejudices and cultural norms will not be measurable until we understand what is important to local victims. Indeed, I ask the question, is it positive to get more reports of violence against women and girls as women become more confident in the work being done and trust our metrics? Or is that negative? For some situational environmental improvements, the measured improvements, such as fixing and increasing lighting, can easily be both measured and achieved and have been added. But I don't accept this is a solution to tackling violence against women and girls. The answer is much deeper, with lots of complex layers. Many moving parts and a whole systems response, including the criminal justice system, health, town planners, licensing, which you've heard about today, and education and government.
David, you're out of time. Thank you. Laura, do you have a supplementary?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Public policy should be one thing and one thing only, which is effective. And if we cannot demonstrate a plan or strategy's effectiveness to its residents, then really we're not doing our job. And me questioning this, which purely shows that I want to help women and girls, and you just label it as political and denigrate it, is offensive and wrong. But my question is, will you commit to publishing next year how much the Violence Against Women and Girls Action Plan has reduced violence against women and girls in this borough?
I'm sorry you were offended, Laura, but then you've offended me, so don't worry. But I think that the fact that you asked for, you didn't hear what I said, because the violence against women and girls, the problem is measuring it. Is it good that we get more reported or less reported? More reported means people feel safer reporting it. Less reported, they might not be so safe. If we didn't ask them, there wouldn't be any reported. So we've got to make sure that we get the right metrics to measure how effective and efficient this is.
Is that a yes then?
Thank you, members.
Or no?
We now move on to item 135. Look, we now move on to item 135. Can we be quiet, please? Item 135, minutes of committee meetings and ward matters, and we have 20 minutes. Would you please indicate if you wish to speak? Oh, sorry, Jordan, would you like to ask your question?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. My question is to the Member for Active Travel, Transport and Highways. Yesterday, residents in my ward, namely those living on Hatch Ride, had their road closed for the repair of multiple potholes. While action on road surfaces is always welcome, following the end of said works, the extent of the repairs has unfortunately been limited to only a small number of select potholes, despite further and more significant holes within the closed area remaining in place. Moreover, having spoken with residents yesterday, despite a 5.5-hour period being set aside for works, many reported that the work area had been vacated within 2 hours of their start period. What assurances can be given to Woking Without residents that, 1, remaining potholes on Hatch Ride will be addressed in the immediate future, 2, that allotted times for works are more appropriately assessed so that residents can more effectively plan their schedule around assigned works, and 3, that finally, that more effective use of road closures are utilised to achieve the greatest amount of remedial works within the minimum amount of disruption to residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan, for your question. I'm afraid I'm going to have to look into this one. This is not a good use of time by the looks of things for a closure, and if there are other defects that still should have been repaired whilst the road closure was undertaken, we certainly don't want the road to be closed again to do that. So I'll look into this and come back to you.
Thank you. Andy Croy, would you like to ask your question, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is for the Executive Member for Finance. I'll say it slowly so she can look up from her iPad. Great, that's great. Thank you, Imogen. So my question is, last month, and I'm very, very grateful, Council agreed to send or to pay Woodley Town Council £15,000 as a contribution towards CCTV. Could you give me an assurance that once Woodley Town Council has finished its procurement exercise, the borough will and tells the borough we want our £15,000, that the borough will transfer the money and will not interfere in the procurement exercise?
I can't see that the borough would. As far as I'm aware, that £15,000 was added to just to cover for the CCTV that you asked for. Yes.
Councillor Pauline Hellyer-Simons, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. After 42 years, thank you all of you for your comradeship and friendship, which I very much appreciated. And I shall indeed have a lot more time now to read all of the history books that I've addictively collected over the years and not had time to open.
Pauline, can you put your question, please?
I am about to, and that includes 3 from Professor Conway. And my questions are about education. How many children in the Wokingham Without ward received their first choice of secondary school places this year? And what proportion of SEND children are in my ward, and what percentage of those are attending schools outside the borough?
I'm afraid I'll have to give you a written answer. If I'd had some notice of that question, I could have given you an answer on the night, but I don't have those figures to hand.
Thank you. Rochelle Shepherd-Dubay, please.
My question is for Paul again, for active transport. Can you give me an update on the crossing for Bearwood School? And to quote the people up there, children's lives matter, and also so do the parents who accompany them.
Thank you, Rochelle, for your question. Bearwood School, Sindlesham and Bearwood School, there's been a scheme for around 10 years now waiting to be implemented. It involves a formal crossing and the speed limit reduced from 40 miles an hour down to 30. The good news is it's now progressed to detailed design, which will be undertaken. We'll also need to go out to consultation. That will include the police, and providing all of that is goes through smoothly, we'll then be able to introduce it as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Stuart Munro, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is, I think, for the Executive Member for the Environment. I've got a lot of my residents unable to use any of the dark water treatment systems in my villages. Have we got any commitments from Thames Water to fix this problem by upgrading dates for the pumping stations, please?
I actually have not got an answer I can give you immediately on that. Obviously, Thames Water came to overview and scrutiny not too long ago. They've made broad commitments, but I am aware of the fact that their capability to borrow money is somewhat limited at the current time, and they do need to borrow money in order to do a lot of the things that they've been talking about. It is something that affects just about every waterway in our borough, and as such, it's something that we'd like to get on top of, but our powers are limited, extremely limited, because it's mainly an Environment Agency matter. But I'll see what I can find out, Stuart.
Thank you. Andrew Micklewright, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is to the Leader of the Council in relation to his responsibilities regarding housing. Last week, Hawkden councillors were contacted by one of our residents who rents a home privately and receives the Local Housing Allowance, LHS, component of Universal Credit. Her rent is above the current LHA amount, so she pays the difference herself. The LHA is intended to help people on low incomes pay for the cost of rented accommodation. The government recently increased the LHA to bring it more in line with private rent costs to ease the burden on people, like my resident, who have been paying the top-up. My resident was recently told by their landlord that because the LHA has increased, they would increase the rent to include the full amount of the increased LHA, plus what they currently pay on top of the LHA. Could you please raise this matter with WBC officers to explore any opportunities to help this and similar residents who are being treated in this manner, and write to our borough's members of Parliament to express our concerns and to seek their thoughts on remedies to this problem?
I'm very sorry to hear of the experience of your resident, Andrew, and the answer, I think, is yes and yes.
Thank you. Caroline Smith, please.
Executive Member of Highways, sorry. As a council, we're all concerned about safety around schools, and this is a priority for this administration. We are using many highway schemes to help improve safety around the borough schools. One of these methods is the School Streets Initiative, and I understand one scheme is being considered in my ward at Radstock School. Please, can I have an update on this scheme? Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline, for your question. Yes, you're correct. Radstock School is one which we're looking to have a pilot on. Now we've got moving traffic offences powers, we can then therefore use cameras instead of using volunteers, which some authorities have had to do. But I'll keep you posted on the programme for that once we have that.
Graham Howe, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is to the Executive Member for Transport. So, in the 2 years that he has held the role, there's been a lot of talk, but no confirmed action on tackling the speeding, congestion and parking issues in Wargrave, or indeed Remington and Ruscombe too. Could he please give me what we should tell my parish, this one, what he has achieved in the last 2 years, definitively? Thank you.
On parking issues, there are several locations where we've introduced parking restrictions, and there are more still to come in Amendment 2. Those are normally submitted by ward members. You may not have submitted any, so that's maybe why there's not that many in Wargrave, or residents. But there is certainly some that have been submitted, and they are currently being introduced at the moment, which was Amendment 1, and they'll go in the spring, and in Amendment 2, which will go in the summer, subject to them getting through the traffic regulation order and the consultation. Regarding speeding, speeding is down to Thames Valley Police. They're the ones that have the powers. And we liaise with Thames Valley Police on locations where there are speeding incidents, and that information is passed over to them, and it is down to them to actually undertake the mobile speed cameras where they can fit them in, and there's a strict criteria that they have to work to. And if they do have a location to do that, then they will undertake that work.
Clive Jones, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. My question is for the Leader of the Council. In the minutes of the Executive meeting on the 22nd of February, under item 106, the Executive discussed the setting up of the Berkshire Prosperity Board, which, as I understand it, will be the body that replaces the local enterprise partnership. What I want to ask is, given the current difficult position that many businesses find themselves in due to the state of the national economy and the unfair business rate system, which creates extra costs for businesses with physical premises compared to purely online businesses.
Point of order, Madam. This isn't a ward question. This is a speech.
No, it isn't a ward question, Andy. It is a question on the minutes of the Executive of the 22nd of February.
You're right, and I apologise.
Okay. Thank you very much. What a nice way to be leaving the council, with an apology from you.
Come on, you're wasting your time.
So if I can just get to the end, will the Berkshire Prosperity Board be looking at lobbying for reform of business rates to help local businesses?
Thank you for that question. I must admit, when you started off, I was thinking, where's this going? Okay, so the Berkshire Prosperity Board is obviously formed by the 6 unitary authorities, and I think it would be very rash of me to make a pledge that we would go down the route you're suggesting, Clive, without consulting with and getting agreement from my colleagues in the other Berkshire unitaries. However, I do believe that this is something that we will want to take up, because it clearly affects businesses across the county, and I do not imagine any of the Berkshire leaders of whatever political persuasion will want to not go down the route that you're suggesting. So thank you for raising that.
Councillor Rebecca Margetts, please.
Thank you. My question's for Councillor Shenton. Both myself and David Cornish received an email from a local resident about who's been using the SHINE programme for the last 2 years, and her current instructor is specially trained for older, over 50s, so that's probably including myself now. Her class, unfortunately, is ceasing. What plans are in place to ensure classes will be safe and suitable for this lady in particular, because the current classes are moving to places for leisure and they're open for all residents? And that was her question. What plans are there in place for residents like her?
The SHINE programme has lost a lot of participants since the pandemic, to the point where it's been losing money quite considerably. We were 75 classes before the pandemic. We were down to 33 recently. It is basically being transferred to the management of Places Leisure. But some of the classes will continue exactly as they've been. Others will have changes to them. The pricing structure will be different, but there's a considerably well thought out pricing structure, and I can send you details of that. The instructors, the teachers, in some cases, many of them were self-employed, and the council was finding it difficult to retain them because they weren't getting the return from their time with the decreasing number of participants. They will be in a better position with Places Leisure. They will actually get access to sickness benefits and things like that, which they wouldn't as self-employed instructors working for the council, working with the council. I think it's probably fair for me just send you all the details of the price structure and all the details of the classes that will continue, and I have a whole table of that which I can do, and I'll send you an email with it in.
Councillor Mike Smith, please.
Thank you. Loddon Primary School in my ward has two entrances, one on Silverdale Road and one on Hillside Road. The entrance on Silverdale Road has an advisory 20-mile-an-hour sign with flashing lights either side. On the other, on Hillside Road, it has just triangular warning signs saying school. Please could you tell me what is the correct process for a resident to request legally enforceable 20-mile-an-hour limits at both entrances, and how could or how should such a request be processed? Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, for your question. What I'll do is I'll send you a link. There's a special form on our website requesting changes in speed limits. What will then happen is there's a step-by-step process that the officer team will have a look at that, assess it. If they consider that it's worthy going ahead, a scheme will be drawn up. It will go through a public consultation, including with Thames Valley Police. If everything is fine after that, a traffic regulation order will be made for a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit.
Shahid Yunus, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is to our Executive Member for Highways, and it's regarding the 2 disabled parking slots in Headley Road where 2 EV charging units have been installed. I understand the solution for the long term, but that could take months. But in the short term, the situation we have is that we lose 2 disabled parking slots. And those are the ones which are very nearest to the Oakwood Centre, which is heavily being used by the public. Secondly, it will, because still the marking is still there, this has caused so much confusion to the public that, whether, who should park there. For example, can the disabled drivers not needing EV park there? Or is it only the disabled drivers wanting EV charging and no one else? So my question is, what was the rationale behind putting 2 EV charging where the disabled parking slots were in the first place? And what is a short-term solution which the council will propose which will avoid that confusion to the public?
The simple answer is they remain blue badge bays, and there is no change. The EV points have been installed there, but they won't be used as such by anybody else who is not a blue badge holder, because blue badge holders are the only ones who are allowed to park there. That's the terms and conditions of the car park. The bays themselves are not actually wide enough for a blue badge, despite they've been there for some time. We have located 2 other positions where the blue badge holders can go, and that is now in process of happening. And once that happens, then the new blue badge holders will be parking in a slightly different location with a drop curb, because at the moment where the existing blue badge bays are, there is no drop curb at all. And if you're a wheelchair user, you'd need to go about 40 metres towards Lidl, where the parking machine is, and then go up the drop curb and then all the way back again. So the new location will be much, much better for disabled users. So there's no change whatsoever.
Thank you. That's the end of question time. The next item on the agenda is item 136, statements by the leader and executive members, and we have 20 minutes for that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As this is the last council meeting of the municipal year, I think it's an appropriate moment for me publicly to thank the Chief Executive, the Chief Finance Officer, their CLT colleagues and all officers of the Council for their hard work and commitment to the borough. And I'd like to extend those thanks to my executive colleagues and to all councillors, regardless of party. We can look back on a period of considerable achievement, especially when viewed in the context of the financial challenges faced by the Council. Let me highlight a few examples. We've worked with our partners to produce the first draft of the community vision, which will shape the Council strategy and the new Council plan. We have forged a new strategic partnership with the University of Reading, which will bring considerable benefits to the people and businesses of the borough, not least in helping us with our climate emergency action plan, our economic development strategy, and our employment training and skills agenda. We have led the way in the formation of the Berkshire Prosperity Board, which will enable us to bid for external funding for key infrastructure projects with greater chance of success and give us a stronger voice in national decision-making. We have developed a much greater sense of corporate ownership of challenges to help reduce the pressure on adult social care and housing budgets. For instance, we are converting some of our own estate to accommodation for young people in danger of homelessness and care leavers. We have pursued a policy of prevention, early intervention, and investing now to save later. A good example is our purchase of a new care home, which increases provision in the borough and will help control future costs for the council. Another is our successful bid for funding to build 2 new SEND schools in the south of the borough, which will help reduce the council's home-to-school transport bill in years to come. We have secured white ribbon accreditation. Our partnership with our tenants in TLIP has won national recognition. We are including bold new policies on environmental sustainability and energy conservation in our emerging local plan. And we are also in that emerging local plan aiming to designate many protected green spaces and areas of landscape value. We have approved the planting of a COVID memorial wood in Barkham. We have secured, after much time and effort, a contract with SSEN to connect our new Barkham solar farm to the grid in 2026, which will help to decarbonise the grid and produce a healthy income for the council, which it can use on services for our residents. We can all, officers and councillors, take pride in these and many other achievements since May 2023. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any more statements? Prue, I saw you first. Could you keep your hands up, please? Prue, would you like to start?
I start. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have 2 items for this. The first is to tell you that the Council had a focused visit from Ofsted a few weeks ago, looking at our services for children in need and children with a child protection plan. And our focused visit doesn't result in Ofsted making a judgment, but they produce a letter with their views on what they found. And the letter arising from their visit was published on the Ofsted website yesterday. I'm absolutely delighted to be able to tell you that it was very complimentary indeed about our services, and it really hardly could have been any better. You can read it for yourselves. There is a link in the Children's Service Review and Scrutiny agenda, but you can find it quite easily by Googling Ofsted Wokingham. This outcome is a tribute to the hard work of officers who have been determined to drive continuous improvement, and I would like to congratulate them and thank everyone involved, both at the Council and among our partners. And that takes me to the second item. This is Helen Watson's last Council meeting. as she will be leaving in mid-April after over 2 years as our Interim Director of Children's Services. Our new permanent director, Emma Cockrell, will be joining us shortly before Helen goes. I would like to sincerely thank Helen for everything she has done for the Council and for the borough's children. She's led improvement in every aspect of children's services in very challenging financial circumstances and is leaving behind a legacy of a solid and capable team who will continue the transformation of the service. I'm so grateful for the support Helen has given me over the past 2 years, and I think it is very fitting that at this, her last council meeting, I've been able to announce the positive outcome of the Ofsted-focused visit, which underlines the contribution that Helen has made as DCS. So on behalf of the whole council, thank you, Helen, and very best wishes for the future.
Lindsay.
Thank you. This will be my last speech on this. I want to mention the various infrastructure achievements since we took over the role in May 22. These include saving Rook's Nest Farm from 270 houses and replacing this with a COVID memorial wood, an additional area of woodland as part of the neighbouring Sang, and the site for 2 much-needed SEND schools. When we took over in 22, the residents of Arborfield Green had been left with none of the promised facilities, despite over 1,000 homes having been built. Since that time, and with support from the planning officers and the developers Crest and Colour Homes, we now have the commercial centre having gained planning approval last October. The community centre has been agreed and is in the process of being internally designed to support various local bodies. In fact, the leader of the council and I visited it today, and is being designed and supported for local bodies. Plus, we have the Sainsbury's supermarket fully approved with work about to start. I also wanted to say I wanted to include the Arborfield Sports Pavilion, but I hoped it would be going to the April Planning Committee, but it looks more likely to be the May. In the Thames Science Park, in addition to Shinfield Studios and the British Museum, we now have the Natural History Museum coming to this important scientific site, with a distinct possibility of another nationally important facility to follow. The long-awaited new Twyford Library is close to being open, one for Stephen. More recently, the Council, with the help of Homes England, who have provided £29.6 million to support the South Wokingham Distributor Road, and greater flexibility from the various developers involved, the Southern SDL, originally planned in 2011 and included in the current local plan, which runs until 2026 to provide 1,800 homes, will now be moving forward in 2024. And in particular, the developers will now be providing the new primary school, community facilities and the allotments, which were originally to be paid for and provided by Wokingham Borough Council. Thank you.
David Cornish, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I hope members do not think me too parochial if the subject of my first statement as executive member is the impact of the reconstruction of California Crossroads on the local businesses. Having lived in Finch Hampstead for almost exactly 40 years, I have a very deep affection for these businesses, and like all other residents, am deeply concerned about the impact upon them. It is regrettable that this was not given greater consideration when this project was planned and signed off back in 2018. There are lessons to be learned about how such projects are managed in future, but to coin a phrase, we are where we are. We know this is a difficult time for all businesses in the area, and council officers are doing everything possible to help them with the temporary disruption. Project managers are meeting them daily to update them, and for the first time, the council has also used its own communication channels to offer support. Actions in place include maintaining business access and providing signage to show how to get to the businesses, meeting with them daily to discuss deliveries and plan work around them, making sure teams working on site use the local businesses every day, using wider communications, including social media posts, to encourage residents and others to support their local shops and businesses. However, and quite understandably, there are requests that we try and do more. If local government was funded better, it might be possible to consider financial support for these businesses. But it isn't, and so we can't, and we never have in the past. Most recently, Wokingham town centre businesses were not compensated during the disruption caused by the marketplace improvement works in 2017 and 2018. Despite the emotions generated in Finch Hampstead, we do have to be fair to all businesses across the borough and to all of our taxpayers. The best option for business at the moment suffering a loss in trade due to the roadworks is to seek relief by applying to the National Valuation Office Agency for a possible reduction in their rateable value. The council leader has written to the VOA supporting local businesses wishing to claim. Beyond this, the executive has requested the senior officers of the council to examine every possible avenue, however unlikely, by which we may be able to offer more support. We may not succeed, but we will spare no effort in trying. There is a consensus that California Cross badly needs improving and have been neglected for too long. The condition of the road and overall quality of the footpaths would have meant that investment in the junction would have been needed soon anyway. The works taking place include the replacement and upgrade of the infrastructure, such as drainage systems and gullies, which would always have caused a major upheaval. This work will transform an unloved and car-dominated junction into a village centre that works for everybody, and this, of course, all funded by developers and not local taxpayers. This, in the end, will bring new life to the area and more trade for the local businesses. But there is a gap to fill over the next several months, and we hope that all councillors and all other voices will do everything possible to resist the temptation to feed negativity by highlighting challenges, and instead support the local businesses by painting a positive picture about the future. Thank you.
David Hare, please.
I think it's Paul next.
Okay. I just want to say about the adult social care mock review that was a great success. Despite being an authority that's in the bottom half of spend per user, Wokingham had a very positive mock review. And the few headlines I picked out from that review: residents of Wokingham are served well with high quality adult social care services. The overwhelming message the reviewers heard from the staff they met was how proud and happy they were to work in Wokingham. They felt supported within their teams and by their immediate managers and senior leadership team. And something that's very dear to my heart and we heard about at the last council meeting, it is recognised nationally that co-production is a key area of focus for CQC, and many councils are struggling to demonstrate genuine involvement and co-production. In Wokingham, the peer team heard some excellent pieces of authentic and strong co-production. We're going the right way. I know there's always more to do, but this review was very positive and will be shared with ONS in the new municipal year. The learning from it has already been put into practice so that we can make our adult social care better and better.
Paul, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've got a few things to talk about. Road maintenance is my first one. A month ago, the Department for Transport published statistics on the national road condition data, and Wokingham Borough was in the top quartile for the best roads. However, there was an alarming trend that the average was in decline, indicating the continued underfunding by this Conservative government. This week, the annual Local Roads Maintenance Survey report was published, which backed up the data reported by the government's Transport Department, with an estimated 16 billion backlog in road maintenance. This is an increase of 2.1 billion in just 1 year and shows the lack of proper funding for road maintenance by this Conservative government and no strategy for going forward except for to tinker around the edges whilst the road condition declines further. My second point is about Winnersh Park and Ride. In November last year, I announced that Winners Park and Ride would operate on Saturdays on a 20-minute frequency until at least mid-April 2024. I'm pleased to announce that the service will now be extended to operate on Saturdays until at least September 2024. Electric vehicle charge points. I'm pleased to announce that Wokingham Borough Council has been awarded a further £264,000 of government funding to install on-street charge points in residential areas where there is little or no off-street parking available. The charge points will add to the 38 across 18 locations that we installed last year. And my final point is about traffic signals. I'm also pleased to announce that we've been successful in our bid to the Traffic Signal Obsolescence Grant, where we've been awarded £528,000 to upgrade traffic signal systems, replacing unreliable and obsolete equipment to improve reliability. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item 137 is statements from council-owned companies, and we have 10 minutes for this issue. Can you please indicate if you wish to speak?
There are no statements to be made, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Stephen. The next item on our agenda is motion 138. And before we start this motion, I'd like to say something to the people and the young people in the gallery. We don't often see young people in this chamber, and I'd like to say welcome to you and thank you for staying through what you probably felt was the most boring evening of your life. And I'm not sure the next bit's going to be the most exciting, but we are now going to go through the motion which you are here for. I'm afraid you're not allowed to speak, but please listen and we'll take it through. And if you wish to speak to us as councillors afterwards, we're very welcome to stay. You've got a late night tonight. Okay. Motion 515. Pauline, will you be proposing the motion?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
And do you have a seconder? Thank you, Charles. Pauline, would you like to speak to the motion? You have 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. And I'd like to echo your comments about how patient and well-behaved the children in the audience have been. They've been really good, and I hope you're not falling asleep in lessons tomorrow. Many of us in the chamber are parents and guardians, some with small children, some with children who are grown up, some with grandchildren, or perhaps we're aunties and uncles. I'm sure all of us at some point have had a responsibility for caring for children. The urge to keep them safe is overwhelming. When you send a child off to school, you think that their well-being is guaranteed and they're going to be looked after. So you can imagine what it would be like for your child to do something as ordinary as set off for school in the morning and not to be able to make it because they've been injured in an accident on the way. That's what happened to a 7-year-old boy, whose father's in the audience here, walking along Shinfield Road on his way to Crossfield School. A cyclist overtaking a bus collided with the boy and knocked him down. Paramedics struggled to treat him because there were so many cars on the road who insisted on trying to drive past even though there was somebody lying in the road being treated. Thankfully, the little boy has now recovered, but for children trying to get to Crossfields or just to the bus to meet their friends, the road is still unsafe. It's a busy arterial road servicing the university, Royal Berkshire Hospital, 3 major schools and all the residents in South Reading. To cross from one side to the other, people have to weave through traffic or hope that a motorist is kind enough to stop. We can all agree, I hope, that the safety of children in our community is one of the most important responsibilities of a local authority. I raised a request for safer routes to this school, and I met the school with officers in October 2021 to discuss a crossing and cycle access. Parry Bath, a former Shinfield North councillor, presented a petition a year ago arguing a pedestrian crossing would be a sensible way to keep children safe as they walk to and from school. Back in October, I raised this case again in a question during a full council meeting. I thought that surely we could agree that this is the right thing to do. I was disheartened by the response from the Executive Member for Highways. We must prioritise the locations with the highest demand, he said, adding that other locations are a higher priority. When I asked if he'd considered the option for trying to fund the crossing with the school, he stated in his reply, accidents do happen on the highway network. He did at least acknowledge that whilst he hadn't asked the school to contribute, it would be something we could do in the future. Having now checked with the school, they've offered to contribute to a crossing. I'm told this is the only school in the borough with an A road without a crossing. This is not only about the school. Local residents and employees at the Weather Forecasting Centre have to take their lives in their hands to get across the road, to catch the bus, or to get home too early. Many people who live within walking distance drive because they simply can't cross safely, further increasing the traffic on the road. We're very dedicated as a council to trying to encourage people to walk and cycle to work, and yet we make it really difficult for them because they've got a road that they can't cross. I helped with a community survey, sitting for several hours in the rain by the traffic island near Wilsford Close, and saw this with my own eyes. The survey was done by 24 people over a week from 7 a.m. till 8:45.
You're out of time, I'm afraid.
Okay. Can I just finish one sentence?
One sentence.
Yeah. I would like to say this road is desperately needs a crossing. The school have offered to contribute, and I would like this council to act now before another person gets hurt or worse on this road. Put safety first and support this motion.
Thank you. Does any member wish to speak against the motion? Paul?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have an amendment.
Sorry.
I am proposing an amendment to this motion.
The seconder, Pauline, your seconder has a right to speak.
Yes, I second the original to speak.
Yeah, Charles, you can speak if you wish to now.
Sorry.
No, he's speaking on your motion.
Sorry, just could you bear with me? If he speaks on the motion, that means he can't speak on the amendment?
He can speak once on the motion and once on the amendment.
Then, Madam Mayor, I'd like to reserve my right, basically, and save it in case I wish to speak on the amendment.
Thank you, Charles. Okay. Paul, would you like to propose your amendment?
I have a seconder. You usually ask for a seconder.
Yes, please.
Councillor Mickleborough.
Thank you.
Sorry. The amendment needs to be distributed so everybody can see what it states.
We're going to do that now.
Madam Mayor?
Yes?
Could we have an adjournment, as we haven't seen this amendment until this moment, so we can actually properly read it and go through it?
Yes, just bear with us for a moment while we
Okay, thank you.
Have a seconder to that. Thank you, Charles. We need to vote on that now. No, we don't. We just have an adjournment.
No, vote on it.
Yeah.
So all those in favour of an adjournment?
All those in favour of an adjournment, please raise your hands. Thank you, that's carried. Anyone against? Anyone against an adjournment? Anyone abstaining? Thank you. Please take your seats, members. You have the amendment before you. I'm not going to read it all. I'm just going to read the significant piece that has changed, and it's in the final sentence. This council will deliver a crossing without further delays crossed out when the technical assessment meets the criteria and funding becomes available to make access to this school safer. Okay? Paul, you have 3 minutes now to speak to your amendment.
Pardon me, Madam Mayor, don't I get asked whether I'll accept it or not first?
I didn't hear that. Can you speak after Paul's spoken? Sorry.
May I start?
Pauline, after Paul's spoken, you get the opportunity to accept or reject. Thank you.
Have I got the green light to go? Fantastic. I, along with Clive Jones, have met with some of the parents and staff of Crossfield School, and I have a lot of sympathy with them in their quest to have a safe crossing facility installed on the A327 Shinfield Road. We are the party that supports active travel, and this includes walking, cycling and access to bus and rail travel. The previous Conservative administration abolished lollipop staff, built their last crossing in 2019, nothing in 2020, nothing in 2021, and when we took over in May 2022, there were no designs ready, but in 2023, we introduced new crossings in Rose Street, Molly Miller's Lane and Silverdale Road, with a conveyor belt of more to come. We developed and approved a local walking and cycling infrastructure plan, and this plan will help us get more people, including school students, walking, cycling and access to bus and rail. And within the plan, there is a route for the Shinfield Road going past Crossfield School. The Borough Council's traffic management team receives around 20 requests for crossing facilities each year. Each scheme must be assessed to determine its benefits as a level playing field and not on the basis of who shouts loudest. There is a process to be followed, and doing it this way ensures that our limited grant funding from the government is directed to those sites where there is the highest need. We are committed to promoting safe walking and cycling routes to schools where funding is available. However, with the limited budgets we have, I am sure you would agree we must prioritise the locations with the highest demand. The previous assessment was carried out on the 27th of January 2022 during the Conservative administration, and at that time it didn't meet the criteria, and there were other locations within the borough which came out of the assessment as a higher priority. Another assessment has been carried out recently, and the analysis is being undertaken by officers, and once completed, this will be compared with other sites around the borough. I therefore support this amendment to the motion that this council will deliver a crossing when the technical assessment meets the criteria and funding becomes available to make access to this school safer. Thank you.
Pauline, as the proposer of the original motion, do you accept the amendment?
Sorry, no. Do I get to speak now or at the end?
Yes, your right of reply is at the end. Please indicate if you wish to speak on the amendment. You could just keep your hands up for a moment while we check that we've got everyone. Right, the seconder of the original... Oh, sorry. Oh, Andrew Mickleborough, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Before explaining the reasons why this amendment is essential, I wish to thank everybody, including those in attendance here this evening, who's expressed their views regarding the crossing proposals. You are very much our eyes and ears, providing valuable information that is always listened to and greatly appreciated. Thank you. Our council is fully committed to promoting active travel options, including schemes that will enable our children to walk or cycle to school safely. Situations change over time. In this instance, it might be that traffic volumes and pedestrian safety in this section of Shinfield Road have altered. The motion implies a possible increase in numbers seeking to cross this road following the completion of the new senior school. This might also be a relevant issue. Highways officers are very experienced in collecting and evaluating such data, and in making recommendations that can be substantiated with evidence. It is precisely for reasons such as these that there is a strong case to objectively determine the present situation. The amended motion would enable this. Once obtained, this information can be used to determine the next steps, following the due process contained in our council's policies and procedures related to pedestrian crossing requests. The amended motion would ensure that the request for a crossing will be carefully evaluated following due process. This is the approach that would be expected by our residents, and is why I am seconding this amendment.
Thank you. Andy Croy, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As members may know, I spend quite a lot of time volunteering with Community Speedwatch, and often our attention is drawn to particular areas where there are inadequate crossing facilities, or the traffic is speeding and making lives dangerous for pedestrians. And if I could snap my fingers and if I could win a vote in council with the help of you guys, I would have, I think, half a dozen crossings put in straight away. But I do respect and I recognise, obviously, that we have to follow process, because I'm sure we all have crossings in our wards where we would like a crossing done yesterday. We heard earlier of an example of the school in Winnersh where they've been waiting 10 years for a crossing. At one of the sites where we do Speedwatch, a child was injured, was knocked down by a car a few months ago, and they broke their arm as well. So I really understand the frustration of parents that stuff doesn't happen, and I really understand this thing that, you know, you want to protect your children, but all the parents in the borough want to protect their children, and there has to be, if you like, a rule of law a set of rules that everybody understands and everyone can follow. We might not like them, but we're all in the same queue. There's no queue jumping based on how many votes you can get in the chamber. And I know every single one of us finds that frustrating. But we all have to acknowledge that you need that rules-based order if you're going to allocate resources that we don't have enough of. So that's why I'm supporting the amendment, not because I don't want a crossing. Of course I want a crossing. I want the crossing application to be processed in the proper manner. And to add one thing, I'm slightly disappointed, Pauline, that you've bought this because you know, as well as I do, as well as everyone else does, that the rules must be followed and that crossings are not put in by votes of council. You know that, and you should have made that clear to the parents who've come here hoping to hear something different.
Laura Blumenthal, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wish to read out a statement from Ryan, a little boy who was hit on the road by traffic. I'm 6 years old and I live in Early. I used to walk to school on most days along with my dad as I enjoyed walking. We always found it challenging to cross the road as the road was very busy and people would not stop for us. 5 months ago, on 5th of October, I was hit by a cyclist when crossing the road to get to school in front of the school gates. I was taken to hospital and treated for injuries to my head, arms and legs, and my dad was also injured. I never walked to school after that, and I'm very scared of crossing the road. I know that many people have also stopped walking to school after hearing of my accident. I don't think anyone could not be moved by that in this room, and I don't think anything illustrates further why we must vote to get this crossing through as soon as possible. And we could vote it through. That is a possibility. We could get this crossing installed as soon as possible. I also want to draw people's attention to the bottom of the amended motion. The Chief Finance Officer comments, implementing new crossing is likely to cost between 100,000 to 200,000. And to me, a child's life is worth so much more than that. And we cannot put a price on a child's life.
Catherine Glover, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wish to support the motion as amended, but I have to say something. It's similar to what Andy Croy was saying. As the ward member for Shinfield South, I liaise with Shinfield Parish Council over highway improvements within the parish. We have absolutely no objection in principle to any measure that makes travelling to school on foot or by bike a safer proposition for pupils. We also recognise the congestion and general traffic levels on the A327 Shinfield Road within the parish. However, that applies equally to many other roads in the parish and the borough as a whole. The Parish Council's Traffic Working Party has been working with WBC Highways on developing a package of road safety measures throughout the area. The Parish Council had not identified Shinfield Road as one of the highest priorities. They have higher priorities. The Parish Council has made similar requests for controlled crossings elsewhere in the parish, and indeed the improvement mentioned by Councillor Rance earlier. And they've been told that there are a large number of requests and that each time takes time to process. They have also said that they are prepared to provide financial support if required. This stretch of road already has measures identified within the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan. Why then should this particular motion, unamended, be allowed to circumvent WBC's own processes? Finally, this motion does not seem to reflect open government and the desire of WBC to improve communications with town and parish councils, and there was no discussion with the parish council before the motion was submitted.
Graham Howe, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm sure that many of those in this chamber will remember the initiative set up by the then Minister of Education, Ed Balls, called Every Child Matters. This and other iterations of the same policy have continued to the present day by all political colours. In Children's Services, I had, and now the current Executive Member for Children's Services, gone to great lengths to ensure that our children in Wokingham, our future citizens, have great importance in all our decision-making. Indeed, on Tuesday evening, Councillor Bray and Councillor Mickleborough and I attended the Youth Council to discuss the charter that they are developing, which included items on transport to school. Our councillor presentations were in unison that Wokingham's children have a place of great importance and a voice in our decision-making. While some may bring it up that Crossfield School is a private school, this is of no relevance to this motion, as all children, whether they go to maintained schools, an academy school or a private school, they are our Wokingham children and deserve to have as safe a passage to school as possible. We encourage walking and cycling to schools, as has been previously stated. I therefore urge the Executive Member for Transport to put the safety of our children at its highest priority for this motion to be actioned, because where there's a will, there's a way. And this isn't a competition between schools. This is about getting a priority for children.
Sarah Kerr, please.
Thanks. I wasn't actually going to speak, but I've got two school-aged children. I've got one at primary school and one at secondary school. And my one at secondary school, in year 7, he got hit by a car on his bike on the way to school. He went headfirst into the road. Driver got out, sat him up, whacked him on the back, got him breathing properly again. He was so badly winded, got in the car, drove off and left him on a Friday evening after school. Pretty appalling, actually. We got in touch with the police, but the guy had gone. Now, I want, for my children, as well as everyone else's children, all the safe infrastructure there is. And we know there's a lot to do due to the significant underinvestment over the years on safe routes for everyone to use. We've got a lot to catch up on, okay? But we can't afford to do everything in one go. That is simply not possible. I refuse to use my councillor privileges to stamp my feet louder and bring things to the priority. What we have is a process and a policy to make sure that professional experts, professional highways experts that we employ, put this process in place to look at all these different schemes. And we want these schemes to happen, but they have to be done in priority order. We are not in a position to dictate to experts what they should be doing. And we as a party, and I hope everyone else, believes in experts that this council employs. I would love to have measures in place for my children to get to school prioritised, but that is not within my gift, and it would be unethical for me to ask for that. What I do insist, though, is that we follow that process. If you have an issue with the process, then maybe bring a motion to council to challenge the process and we can debate that. That's what the debate should be. And we shouldn't be politicking and making false promises when we have a process to follow. But if you really don't like the process, I expect to see at the next council meeting a motion to debate that. Thank you.
Rebecca Margetts, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A lot of things have been said about this, people misusing their positions tonight, but actually I thought we're here as councillors and we're here to represent our residents, and that is our role. I want to read out a statement from Sophia, and this is her words. I am 11 years old and I live opposite Crossfield School by the South Sports Hall entrance. I've walked to school for over 5 years since my family moved to the area, and I always found it challenging to cross the road to get to school and get back home. The biggest problem was the traffic on the road and lack of consideration from many of the motorists. And on most occasions, we have to cross halfway and rely on someone coming the other way being kind enough to let us pass. Many motorists will not stop, and when you don't cross at a proper crossing, there is no without realising there is no crossing. I still recall the fear when realising a few years ago with my 82-year-old grandfather and a speeding motorist swerved past us at great speed, narrowly missing us, and then honking and shouting at me and my grandfather. He was so upset that he was nervous about me walking to school every time after that. If you can't listen to the words of these children and these young adults that are saying this is an issue, we are here to represent our residents. This is our role as borough councillors. And unfortunately, by adding these words into this motion, it leaves no target, no date. It's again, another delay and diver. It's delaying the motion. It's delaying any action being taken. We have no idea when this assessment will meet the criteria and when funding will become available. And all this does is kick this crossing into the long grass, and I cannot accept it because of that.
Andrew Gray, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to agree with lots of the statements that have been said tonight. And I do really empathise with all the parents and the children of Crossfield School who have had to deal with this busy road and the accidents which have unfortunately happened there. I do support this amendment because I do believe that when we're talking about fairness across the borough, I think it's incredibly important that everyone is treated the same. What we're saying with this is that we're saying that process doesn't have to be observed all the time. And I think a number of people have spoken about the process and a fair process being observed with it. A number of members have talked about the priority of children across the borough. And I think as much as everyone else here, understand that children are at the heart of lots of the things that we do. But if we're prioritising children in the borough, we need to do so in a fair way, and we need to prioritise all the children across the whole borough. Now, actually promoting this process does that, because it means that there may well be a strong case, and I do hope this crossing does go ahead in time, but we need to make sure this case is strong for that. And I would actually say, although it's not an amendment on here, I do think it's important on here that although Crossfield School has very generously offered to contribute towards this, I think with the process and with that fairness, that if the council decides that this is a priority, that it should be funded fully by the council if it is seen as a priority. So I do think this is a case of fairness, and I do wholeheartedly hope this does go ahead, but I would like to see process and fairness observed.
Stephen Conway, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, can I congratulate Laura and Rebecca on the powerful testimony they gave us from pupils who have been affected by injuries and anxiety about crossing roads caused by unacceptable behaviour by drivers. That is very powerful testimony, but I think it is very well worth bearing in mind. This is testimony that could be replicated across the borough. I have requested quite some time ago a crossing in my own borough to enable pupils safely to get to the pig at school. That is being evaluated, that is being assessed as it should be. I am very aware that there have been injuries from children trying to get to the pig at school. The fundamental point here, Graham said, I hope nobody's going to draw attention to the fact that this is an independent school. You, Graham, are the only person that has done so in this discussion, because it is an utter irrelevancy. All of our children deserve to be protected as they get to school. All of our children, regardless of what school they go to, deserve to be protected as they go to school. But that is the fundamental point of this amendment. We must behave in a way that is fair and equitable across the borough and make sure that we do create conditions in which every child can get safely to school. I, like Andrew, hope very sincerely that this request for a crossing will be acceded to soon. I hope it will be. But it needs to be acceded to through due process, not by a vote of council. That's politicians deciding to override professional judgments about where the crossings need to go first. And again, I think we do that at our peril. You have to remember that if we decide to change the priority order on the basis of our own feelings of emotional commitment to a school, a set of parents, the situation in a particular locality, we then disadvantage a school, a set of parents, and the situation in another locality that may have an even stronger case for a crossing being introduced rapidly. So I think we have to go through due process. I have enormous sympathy for the parents involved in this situation. We want to do all we can to remedy it as quickly as we can, but we have to do it in the proper way. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Keith Baker, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to speak directly to the amendment. I have a further speech when we actually get into the full debate. I think I want to open up saying I'm actually very pleased that my last contribution to this council and this chamber is on this subject matter, which is the highest priority and should always be the highest priority of every single councillor here. I want to go on to apologise to the residents, the parents and the children who've come here to see how this council works, how your councillors represent you with your requirements. And I must apologise that you've had nothing but dribble and twaddle and procedure and bureaucracy, all aimed with one simple aim in mind: to kick it into the long grass. What is the technical assessment? We don't know what that is. What is the criteria? We don't know what that is. Funding becomes available. Great, that's a good one. We're going to have 9 million in reserves, hopefully in 2024. Where's the funding? It's got to be external. It's all aimed at kicking this into the long grass. And, by the way, there's a precedence. It's already happened before on a school called Floriette Montague. Exactly the same. Huge petition for a crossing. And guess what? It was deferred to do an assessment, to look at the criteria, to look at funding. And I believe that was a year ago. This is exactly the same. So I urge everybody, for the sake of the children, that we do not allow this to be kicked into the long grass and we actually vote it through. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I'm going to start by apologising because I have to speak into the microphone on your instructions, and that means I have my back to the people in the gallery who are the people I would really like to be addressing. So I apologise for having my back to you. You have come here tonight wanting a crossing for your school to keep yourselves, if your children, safe, and if your parents, to keep your children safe. If you're a teacher, to keep the children in your school safe. I understand where you're coming from. You want a crossing for yourselves. But as the leader referred to earlier, there are schools all round the borough in the same position. If we do what you want, what is to stop some other school coming along, putting a motion, getting a councillor to put a motion in and overriding your motion and saying we'll do this one without delay? We cannot do that. I hope you would understand we have to look after the interests of every school, every crossing point, every child in the borough. There's been some emotional appeals. We've had tugging at our heartstrings, which I utterly understand. But this is not a decision we can make for emotional reasons. We have limited resources. We have to spend those resources as wisely as we can. And that means that we have to prioritise the spend to those areas that need it most. We have a technical process. I'm surprised Keith doesn't know what that is because he was the lead member for highways for some years. And Pauline also was the lead member for highways. She turned this crossing down. I find it very difficult, you know, to say to you, I'm sorry, we can't do this without delay, but we can't. We have to be fair to everybody. We have to follow the process and we have to use our resources widely. And I hope you would understand that this is a decision we have to make with our heads and not solely with our hearts. Because if it was made with our hearts, we would be with you, but we can't do that. So I'm sorry I'm speaking with my back to you, but this is not kicking it into the long grass. It's putting it into the process with all the other people who, like you, want a crossing, and we will address those people in priority order, because that is the responsibility and accountability you have to have when you are running a council. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the end of our list of speakers. Now it's Charles Margette's opportunity to speak to the amended motion or reserve his right to speak to the original motion.
I would like to speak to this, Madam Mayor, if I may.
Is that the original you mean?
To
or
the amended one.
To the amended.
for
Okay,
clarity.
Charles.
No,
No.
that's correct.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, do we not need to vote on the amendment first?
No. No.
Would you like to speak now to the amended motion or to the amendment of the motion?
You're right.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I would. Right. This council believes children should be able to walk or cycle to school safely. It's vital that the council provides the appropriate infrastructure to enable this. We all agree with that. You've heard that tonight. There's a big difference, however, between warm words and action. 18 months ago, I presented a motion to this council asking for improvements to a crossing and other measures outside Floreat Montague School in Wokingham. The motion was based on a petition signed by over 500 local residents. 2 Liberal Democrat councillors had signed the petition supporting these changes, but this did not stop them and the rest of the Liberal group voting to put this proposal into the Highways Improvement Fund, i.e. the long grass, where it remains to this day. Tonight we can see the same pattern of behaviour again. Warm words about safe words to school, but when faced with sensible and realistic proposals to improve the route safety of our children on the way to school, they're moving against it. Warm words basically from councillors about supporting active travel. Again, we all agree with that. But again, a motion, an amendment put forward, which will again see this disappear into the long grass. Warm words are easy, action is hard. Fortunately, at Floreat Montague, there have been no accidents at the time of speaking. However, as my colleague Councillor Jorgensen has outlined, a 7-year-old boy has been hurt on this road in the recent past. The requirements for 50 crossings per hour has been exceeded. The school is offering to pay half the cost. How much harder does this need to be? How much longer does it need to be dragged out? I support the proposal that my colleague Councillor Jorgensen has moved tonight, and I would encourage all members to do so.
Pauline, you may now speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
On the amendment.
I am going to speak on the amendment. Firstly, just to correct something Prue said, one of my last acts as executive member for Highways in the last 6 months in which I was doing that job was to meet with officers, Rebecca Brooks, and the school to try and progress this crossing and also cycle route access. I certainly did not refuse this crossing. The process has been glacially slow. Parents have worked very hard to facilitate the much vaunted process which has been talked about as if it's completely perfect. A comprehensive survey evidence was presented to officers, including the director and the exec member for the AD for transport. They provided a comprehensive pack of evidence. They actually provided a map which showed where parents lived to show how many parents could actually walk to school if there was a crossing. They provided evidence that the Manual for Streets recommendation had been exceeded. They provided as much as possible to try and get officers to accelerate the process, so they actually looked at the evidence. The professional assessment failed in 2024. The current assessment, which is underway at the moment, had to be redone because officers in a meeting claimed that there was only one entrance to the school, despite the planning permission clearly saying that there were two. The first set of cameras put out did not cover both entrances, they only covered one, so they've had to put a new camera out again. It's completely and utterly ridiculous, and it's taking far too long. Other requests for crossings are not on A roads. This is the only crossing that has been a request.
Pauline, can you cease for a minute?
Thank
Paul,
you.
have a
I
point
would
of
like
order.
a correction on that, because the cameras
Paul,
that were...
can you state your point of order?
Oh. Whatever number it is.
I don't think there is one.
4.2.13.15. The cameras that were installed...
Paul, can you hold on for a moment while we just check that?
13.15. 0.15. I think you said 50. Did you say 50?
So can you repeat the point of order again?
Uh, 14.2.13.15.
That point of order is responses by officers. You are not an officer, I'm afraid.
Okay.
No, that's...
Yeah, 4...
$13, $15, $40.
4, 2, I'm trying to see it from here. dot 13, dot 15.
Responses by officers.
No.
I think, Madam Mayor, the purpose is to appoint a personal explanation.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I didn't mention Paul at all. I can't see how there is a personal explanation.
Paul 421314 is a personal explanation may only relate to some material part of an earlier speech by the member which may appear to have been misunderstood. Is that the point that you're making?
That's correct, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
The
Go ahead then, Paul.
The cameras which were...
Point of order.
Just wait.
The member has not mentioned cameras at all, so I can't see why he's explaining something.
You did mention cameras. The cameras that were installed covered both accesses.
Point of order. The personal
Paul,
explanation point is only allowed to cover things that you previously said. You haven't said any of that.
You have
No,
said
it's what
in this meeting...
You've just said.
No,
they
Paul,
cover,
it's
they
you
cover
that
both accesses. And the cameras that
can we get on with
have
this,
been installed are to ensure it covers even further down the road.
Something, Paul, that you have said previously in this meeting. And I don't think that's the point of order that you're making. Thank you. Right, where are we now?
May I continue, Madam Mayor? May I continue?
Yeah, Pauline, Keith stood up and Prue stood up. Can I take them first?
Very quickly, can we have extension on this motion? Because what we've now seen as basically filibustering, lots of time wasted, incorrect points of order, that takes time. Can we have that added on to the end of this time's limit? Thank you.
Thank you.
I stood up to make a very similar point, however, not about the time limit for the motion. We've already exceeded the half an hour debating time, and therefore I think we should move immediately to the vote, first on the amendment and then on the thing. We are already out of time. We've got 5 minutes to go in the meeting, and we've already lost 3 motions.
My recollection from last time this happened was that the speech at the end of the motion could continue, even though the time had expired. It happened to me in reverse.
So who is going?
I have no objection to Pauline doing a speech at the end, but then we must move to the votes.
Pauline, will you continue, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, let me see where I was. The point I would like to make also, this request for a crossing is the only request that I know about that's actually on an A road, so therefore it should be higher priority. I am told that Shinfield Parish Council were consulted by residents. Andrew Grimes apparently sent members to talk to Lawrence James in Shinfield Parish Council, but they didn't get a response. So they have tried to do a lot of things to follow the correct process. The school has offered to help, and this has been ignored. This has gone on for long enough. The council has adequate funds to do the scheme, and I worry that this effect of this motion is simply to kick the project into the long grass, putting more lives in danger on a very busy road.
Thank you. Catherine.
Personally, the motion had not been mentioned to Parish Council.
Okay. Paul, should we just go to the vote?
The final sentence I was going to say was I worry that this motion in effect is kicking the project into the long grass, putting more lives at danger on a very busy road.
We are now going to move to a vote on the amendment. I'm asking for all those in favour of the amendment. Against? Against? Were there any abstentions? Abstentions? Thank you. The amendment is carried in the substantive motion.
Now we vote on the substantive.
We are now going to vote on the substantive motion.
All those in favour?
All those in favour? We're voting on the motion as amended, which is now the substantive. Against? Right, are you clear that was in favour? Now, vote against. Abstentions? I did say against, yeah. Right, and now abstentions. We're out of time. The motion as amended is now carried.
And we're done.
Thank you, members. That was a very exciting council meeting for me. Thank you for your time. I'd like to take this opportunity to say have a nice break over Easter and take a rest. I'm sure we'll all be out pounding the streets for exercise.